Good evening. It's Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. This is the third night of 3 nights that were dedicated to reviewing the budget. Littleton City Council had set aside 3 hours each of the 3 nights. This is the last of those. We started at 6 and hopefully end at 9 this evening. When we left last night, we had 2 items on the plan for Tuesday that we didn't get through. Those will be the first ones that we'll deal with this evening, open space and citywide. And then if you have a copy of the agenda, we'll move on then into the Wednesday agenda. From there, the city manager has talked with Tiffany to figure out for sure the smoothest way to go through those, so he'll mention them in a moment. And to let you know that we have policy questions this evening on several of the different things we'll be talking about. And then we'll have a pretty wide-ranging discussion after we've completed some of the policy questions. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you're here. And turn it over to the city manager.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see, first of all, just want to emphasize again here for council that our staff here, we're collecting all of the questions here that's been coming out of this discussion for the past 2 days, plus today, and that staff will be providing a response to every single one of those questions. We'll be sending that out to council here on Friday, some of which we've already been answering here, but we will make sure we capture all of that discussion so that council gets to see that. So the order here this evening, as the mayor said, we're going to start with open space. We got a couple of citywide issues to talk about. I think from that point we're going to look at your requests from the nonprofits largely and kind of move through that process and let the council decide how much they want to fund and for who. You should have a hard copy packet at your space there. It has the spreadsheet plus the 1-page application for each one of those. That was also sent to you electronically this morning, I believe. Then after we talk about the nonprofits, there was a question yesterday about the status of some of our incentives. And so Tiffany's going to give us a quick briefing on that, and plus where you can find it within the budget document. From there, we're going to go into the unfunded discussion. We'll start with operations. And we'll talk about some of the issues that are not funded in operations, specifically the general fund. We'll also talk about unfunded capital. And at that point in time, we're going to, based on the conversation yesterday, the council was asking about some possible options here for funding of street maintenance. And so we've got some options here for the council to consider and take care of that at that point. The agenda also has kind of future funding or revenue discussion. Talk a little bit about that. Finally, the proposed development review increases here for Public Works and for community development. And then finally, the wrap-up. So that should be about 7:15. Good start. Thank you. So with that, Tiffany, why don't you just kind of start us off here?
All right, good evening, council. It's our third night of budget meetings, and hopefully we can get through this evening. We're going to start with open space, and we have Keith here, and if we have any particular questions, Erlene can certainly jump in and help us if we have any of those. So I'll just let Keith take over.
So, open space. We have a variety of funding sources and a variety of expenditures in this bucket. The total request for the year is $350,000. Flip over to the next slide. So, I'm just going to go through some of these here. We can talk about the specifics of them. Basically, the way our open space works is we get funding from the open space tax in both Arapahoe County and Jefferson County. We get money from Conservation Trust as well as from the general fund. For park projects, we provide funding directly to the South Suburban for them to deliver projects typically. We also contribute to their operations expenditures, primarily for the river park is the simplest way to put that. So the capital expenditure we have is related to $80,000, just about $81,000 for repaving of the parking lot at the Carson Nature Center, which I was rolling through right there. So that's the first one, $83,000. Is that a standalone policy question? Or?
Yeah,
okay.
these are two separate.
Each one separate.
It's 2 separate ones.
Okay. So that's,
We're on 12, but 11 proceed.
right, so that's the first one is the, this one right here. Do you want me to break out the operations expenditures? Was that on 11?
It's in the packet, it's in the
Okay.
budget highlights.
Basically, so everybody, for edification who might not have that in front of them, the projects that are slated in terms of work with South Suburban include work at Stern Park, Progress Park, Promise Park, Elati Park, Bowles Grove, ball field renovations, and then $100,000 for design and planning for future projects as well. We've changed how we're interacting with South Suburban from a staff level. We recently met with them, both the Public Works and Engineering staff, our grounds and landscaping staff, and also our community development staff. We reviewed a number of things, and we're going to start a process where every January we meet with them on a broad scope, what's planned for the next few years, and then we're going to have a couple of meetings in May and June which drive specificity of projects, engineering review. We've also talked to them about some of the things that we think are important going forward. One of the observations we have with a lot of new engineering and transportation staff is we've got a lot of great neighborhood parks, but very little pedestrian and bicycle connectivity to those parks. And so as we look forward into multimodal work in our transportation master plan, that's something that we'll need to do in partnership with South Suburban. So those are the primary expenditure projects on the capital side.
Keith?
Okay. Question that has come up in some of the tours of the neighborhoods. Folks have talked about things not necessarily being as tight as that they were at any point in time. And just in your staff relationship and discussions with that, we've often had a breakfast with the board and staff. But the most recent questions have been on what can we expect on the trails, the edges, the weeds that seem to be more evident than folks recall from prior years.
So one of the discussions...
Just as let me finish.
Sure, sorry.
Just a little piece here. Just as we're looking at a indexed around pavement, is there a level of service component that shouldn't we be having something like that in our discussions with South Suburban?
Well, that's a very good point in general, because one of the things that we're talking about in staff that you'll probably be seeing from us in the future is we need to have a serious discussion about level of service for landscaping of the things we provide in this community. Medians, we have lots of things that we take care of that in many communities would be taken care of by HOAs and things like that. So we need to have discussions about our level of service on those and what that costs per acre and so forth. South Suburban, we haven't had that discussion yet with them specifically. I have heard some of that feedback as well. One of the discussions that I'm interested to have with them is, over the last 15 to 20 years in parks and grounds maintenance, not just here but around the country, a major philosophy change is kind of transforming things, that we're seeing a lot more naturalized landscapes, less water utilization, less herbicides and pesticides in the applications out there. And so sometimes there's a discord between what people see and what they want. The way we kind of put it jokingly at the staff is there's some people that want all the trails and open space to look like Augusta National Golf Club, if we're familiar with the Masters on television.
I've walked the course.
Yes, and there are some folks that have a very different view and a much more naturalized landscape. And so in any neighborhood, you're going to have a diversity of opinion. So that's one of the things that we'll continue to engage with them on. And maybe as we move forward, we'll note that and bring back some information to you on that.
And at least get to the point where folks know what the expectations are.
Very good. Yep.
I think that the conversation of open space probably should, and I know you guys are working on having an open space plan or committee or whatever, and I definitely want my want to be part of that, partly because of my work with South Platte Working Group. One of the things that I'm conflicted with, and what we've done over the last couple of years with the open space money, is that there are, I don't know if the tail's wagging the dog or the dog's wagging the tail anymore. And one of the things that concerns me is that while we do have multiple funding sources, one of those funding sources is the primary, but it is also one that comes with a great deal of restrictions. And so there are things that fund, that the Arapahoe County Open Space cannot do. Or there are funds that might be more appropriate, and maybe it can. Maybe it is okay for that fund to pave a parking lot. Maybe that's in there. But there's other things that other funds cannot cover that the open space fund should and can, and that's where that money should go. And I think we need to be a lot more intentional and a lot more deliberate about what pot we're pulling money out of for what projects, so that we're not cheating one, we're not losing an opportunity, essentially. The other thing is that a lot of that money in that open space fund, the Arapahoe Shareback money, has an incredible opportunity for partnerships, and has we have taken that money over the last 20 years-ish. No, it hasn't been 20 years, it's been 12 years. And probably produced a volume of 5 times the value of our initial investment, because we work with the partners that work with us on that. So I think there needs to be, the planning around that needs to include that opportunity, because for every dollar we spend out of there, we can get matches through our partners, and that's what we've done. The other thing I'm not seeing anywhere is I'm not seeing the list of things that we have approved. And we have master plans out there that we have approved. We have a Reynolds Landing master plan requiring $4 million. It's nowhere on here. These things need to be accounted for, and I'm fine with leaving money in there, designating it that's where it's going to build into. We also have Riverside Downs, where that is a master plan. We've been waiting 3 years for the Army Corps to give us permission. We're in queue for that. Then when it happens, what did we do? That money that was earmarked, I don't see it anywhere anymore. So I'm hesitant to really move forward with any significant spendings out of the open space until we have a better map and a better plan for where these go. I get that the schools want help and these parks and stuff like that, but there's also an incredible amount in other places which isn't even showing up on here. So I think that concerns me a bit. And I also am not inclined to earmark me and my $100,000 of potential spending.
That is the threshold. That is the threshold, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Ask for 9,000. And we don't even, we don't need to do that. We don't need, unless there was something that we were really thinking about, we don't need to hold that money. We can come back anytime, all year long, and fund something out of the open space. That is specified, that is protected money. So I'm not really enthused about putting $100,000 in there for our Parks and Rec district that we don't even know why they need it or what they would need it for. But here, you guys, we're going to save you give you $100,000. Tell us how you want to spend it. And that's not how I feel comfortable working. I think it's our city. We were part of we're the shareback recipients. It's our it's our citizens' tax dollars. And I think where I said earlier, the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail, I think we need to get that proportion back again. So that's my input at this point. I really would like us to, if there's a way that unless there's some urgent spending that needs to be done, that we have to approve, I'd like to hold until we get this group, the open space group, analyzing and figuring out where things should go and a future plan for the money, because we know the share back's coming, and I think having an intentional plan for that is a really good idea.
I mean, Mr. Mayor, actually, Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman made the point of why we need a 5-year plan here for open space. We put that on the list, because I think from a staff perspective, especially with a lot of new staff, we don't have the history. It's hard for us to understand where the council would like to take that from. And so we certainly agree that we need to be a little more strategic and try to plan for some of this. I think what you see in the budget here for 2018 were basically conversations that have taken place recently with, as we understand, with South Suburbans who are trying to just move those issues forward. But if the council has a different view of that, certainly.
Well, what's not in here is the money that we allocated for the Chatfield reallocation.
Yes, it is.
It's here.
It's here.
Where is it?
If I can just speak to a couple of the things that you've said, Debbie, and not at all to be combative, I just want to give a little bit more light. This year, as most of you know, Mike Broughton has, who was in charge of a lot of our open space stuff and has been doing a lot of the conversation. He transitioned out this year, and we've been trying to kind of like get up to speed and kind of fill in the gaps. So I've been taking somewhat charge of a little bit of this budgeting process for open space this year. And so I wanted to just kind of point out to you guys that there's a lot of stuff in here that is not new, so to speak. We are reappropriating funds for projects that South Suburban knows will not be completed in 2017, that you all actually already approved in the budget in 2017. So instead of creating a PO and having to carry forward that money next year, we're just we're requesting you guys to reappropriate it. So these are projects that you guys have already approved last year. So I just want to lay that part out there first. The Chatfield reallocation is in, yeah.
Which project specifically have we already?
Absolutely. Stern Park for $93,750 has already been approved. We are on page 161, and it's pretty close to the bottom. Sure.
It's also there.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little slow today.
Okay, 161.
I'm a little slow all the time.
All right. Everybody ready?
Stern Park, what's the number?
The account number is, this is not going to be very helpful to you at all.
7835.
7835.
Okay,
yeah.
They're all 78.
They
Okay,
all
I see
are,
it here.
sorry.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right.
So that one's one of them.
Okay.
Then continuing down the list, this capital projects, this one that's policy question 12, actually was approved when they went out to bid. The project cost a lot more than what they had expected it would cost. So they have completed a portion of the project. They are requesting that we fund 50% of the remainder of the project. And so this is our 50%. And South Suburban will be matching the other 50% on the parking lot at the Carson Nature Center. That's what this whole $80,830 is for.
So that's, which line? That's in here, or is it back on priority?
Think of it as capital projects, SSPRD.
Yeah. Capital Projects, SSPR.
All right.
Okay?
That's the Carson Nature Center.
Yes.
Okay.
The next line item down, Progress Park. 200,000 of that was approved this year in 2017. The other 250 is included in policy question 11. So this is a two-phase project. So they're not going to be able to complete phase 1 this year, but they'll do both of them next year. The one right after that, Promise Park Playground, $100,000. That one also was approved in 2017 and is being requested to be reappropriated. The next one, Elati Park Playground, exact same thing. It's $125,000. That one was approved this year and has just been requested to be reappropriated for next year. And the $100,000, so to speak, blank check, if you will, for planning and design. This is South Suburban requesting that we change the way that we budget. So as you guys can see, there's a lot of projects that we budgeted in 2017 that they aren't going to be able to finish this year. So what they're doing here is they're asking for the planning and design money in the year they're actually going to spend it. And then next year, they will ask for the construction cost of those projects.
Really?
Yes.
So we should learn from experience. You ought to make these 999,000.
I should.
Here's the deal, okay,
I've
so
already made a note.
planning and design what? I mean, we haven't asked them to plan or design anything.
After meeting with them recently, one of the things that they're moving towards is much like the situation we have here in some of the areas we talked about, especially yesterday in Public Works, is that they're moving towards a 5-year capital planning model. One of the issues that they have, which Arlene just highlighted in the budgeting, is from a capacity perspective, they were trying to design and deliver projects in the same year because that's the way funding was coming to them from partner jurisdictions, which is pretty near impossible. So as part of the process with them, we do have a Parks and Open Space Master Plan that has been adopted by this council, and that's the basis for decision making at this point in time. So as part of this is, our next round of meetings with South Suburban at the staff level is to talk about what does that 5-year capital program look like for the facilities that are adjacent to and in and around Littleton that are impacting us, and how does that look for us financially over the next 5 years. We're asking them to move to a more substantial midterm planning model that will allow us to successfully plan our projects and funds, and that's important to us in the Public Works side so that we can make sure that we've got work, whether it's storm drainage or otherwise, that ties into those projects so we can collectively be as successful as possible. So we've asked them to move in that direction. They are moving in that direction. They have, I believe, some of the challenges that we do. They've got some capacity issues to make that happen staff-wise. So, our basis from a staff perspective is the open space and parks master plan. I mean, that's an adopted plan, so that's our priority.
What would happen if we said we don't want it to be, in Arlene's words, a blank check, but rather here's the list of items that are going to be planned for?
Oh yeah, we would certainly, what I can say to that is, even if we appropriate the money and, there's going to be another meeting with our staff and them, and they're going to come back to us, and that's the question that will be answered, so we'll be able to provide that to you. I don't have, obviously, today to provide that to you, but.
In fact, I'd suggest that we have a very specific budget proviso on that so that it does require city council approval of the projects to be planned before the money is expended. Yes, please.
Yes.
You mentioned Stern Park, Progress Park, Promise Park, and Aladi Park.
Yeah, Tiffany told me I'm off.
Grove.
Yeah, Tiffany told me I got off a line. So Eladi's actually 100,000, and then there's Bulls Grove, which is the 125.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have my ruler.
Thank you.
And
Jerry always has a ruler, so.
I have 3 of them.
It's because you're a straight arrow.
That's right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's in.
So I'm not sure if we said this or not. I mean, I heard what was said, but it seems to me what we are saying we've experienced is, hey, will you support such and such? And we get a number, and then the next thing we know, the actual project is going to be twice the original discussion. So we need to have them really carefully spec out what the devil it is they want to construct and what it will cost, and be mighty darn close to that. Now, we can appreciate sometimes when the cost of certain materials goes up, we've had some excitement, but that's a different kind of issue. But it's like here, we thought we were pretty much in the ballpark, and now we're buying half of Colorado with this.
Well, agreed, and I think that's the process that Keith is trying to describe. I think will address a lot of that. So when they're doing a lot of that preliminary work up front to set the scope of the project, then we come back and understand a better estimate. I think they're trying to do too much of it all in 1 year, and so I think that's when some of those estimates can get a little difficult. I've had a couple of conversations with Rob Hanna about this, Executive Director of South Suburban, and they're trying to move to a different model here so that they have a little more accuracy that's more dependable. So that is their goal.
Well, if they want the citizens to be supportive, and there are citizens who track this fairly carefully, and the newspapers print it, and then other citizens see it, they want the support, they can't suddenly be doing something like this. And if we think we can't do this year, maybe it gets put off until 19.
And I can assure you, Rob is very sensitive to that issue. So for whatever money that we partner with, they want to be able to deliver. And so he understands that challenge.
And
I have a
what
question.
Arlene said about,
I'd like to chime in at some point here.
okay,
Okay, Arlene, was it the Progress Park that the prices doubled?
It did not double. It's a 2 different phase thing. So last year we budgeted the first phase, but yes, it is Progress Park.
Which one was it that we didn't have?
Carson Nature
It was
Center.
the Carson Nature
Yes.
Center, where the prices increased quite a bit.
Yeah, I think there was my understanding is that there was not just, there was some material issues, but there was some engineering issues related to some things in the field that drove some of those change orders.
Such as?
Drainage, working in natural areas, those kind of things. I mean, I can get you a more detailed report on that if you'd like us to, for sure.
Is that the project that's where they used to park the maintenance facilities next? Okay.
It's overflow
It's a
volunteer
dirt.
parking. So you go toward the center and go left.
just find us a dirt lot for years.
Okay, who has not had a chance to talk? Anybody? Doug?
I have a rant that's a little bit different than Debbie's. What we're basically doing is taking our allocation of the Arapahoe County Open Space funds and using it to do part of South Suburban's job. And I actually understand that because they're our Park and Rec department, and it's sort of strange for us to be getting those funds in the first place. But I think the voters had the expectation that we would be using those funds to acquire open space while the open space was available to acquire. And we are getting built out. We are running out of opportunities to acquire open space. I think it'd be more prudent for us to use those dollars in partnerships, like Debbie said, with other entities to maximize our dollars to go out and purchase open space while it's left to be purchased. And then, as we get closer to build out, then turn around and come back and start completing some of these parks.
Actually, the latest piece that went with the open space and extending that allows for development of parks, and there is a component that allows for some aspects of maintenance. It's not all acquisition.
It's very
on the
little
re-up.
maintenance. It's very.
I realize that, and they did that because Arapahoe County actually has its own park district that's out on the east side that had no ability to maintain their own parks. So they had to do that, and it makes sense, and I'm not opposed to that. But in our situation, I think what we should be concentrating on is acquiring open space, hopefully before the project is submitted to community development. And then, once all those major projects are done and most of that open space opportunity is gone, then to come back and concentrate on doing the development of the parks. That would be my preference.
Well, we did have, we had an open space task force, I think it was 2011 through 2012, and that task force was pretty robust and did a pretty substantial, and Phil and I were both on that, and the council approved that task force and its marching orders, and then ultimately its recommendations. And that task force, we looked at every single potential opportunity for open space within the city of Littleton, and designated whether or not those were worth pursuing, recognizing that there was private property rights involved in nearly all of it. And so that plan has been part of what we have been tracking and following as with our purchases. And there is less and less land to purchase. There's a couple of small opportunities out there now, but but there's not nearly what there was 4, 5, 6 years ago. And so what the working group has recognized, particularly when we came back together again, the first phase of the working group was really acquisitions. And then the second phase has been what do we do on those, and how do we serve the communities. One of the aspects was helping with economic development too, which the Riverside Downs is an example of spending money to help with that shopping center. And so so that's kind of the direction of that, the focus of that, which has been very effective. But we've spent a lot of time on safety in the river, seen immense results from that. But we have other plans that require substantial work in the river that are in queue. So here's my thing. I won't go through all this. I could spend an hour and a half talking about this. This is what you said about this task, about Mike Broughton and all. I was working with him on that, and then all of that stopped. And I'm passionate about getting that back. We have to create a priority, similar to what we did with the task force for the open space, a priority for where our priority is for parks, recs, trails, and open space with the money that we have. And that needs to be done based on what is our inventory, what's available, what's in queue, what's not in queue, what's the dreams. And until we have that, I'm hesitant I get it, we've got things in queue, that's fine, done. But I'd like to see that group, maybe March 31st is the deadline to have the report back to council on what that is, so that we can make things happen. It shouldn't take forever. It is important. We do lose opportunities to purchase by waiting. So I guess that's just my thing. I'd just like us to have a better roadmap as to what we're doing. The money's finite, the land's finite. The expenses continue to escalate. We have a problem with maintenance costs because they're not covered by a lot of our funding sources. Maintenance is getting more and more and more. We have to figure it out. Let's figure it out. Let's get a roadmap. Let's get a plan. I feel so much better about spending these kind of millions of dollars.
So, to Arlene's point on policy issues 11 and 12, generally, I think you can say this is to continue issues that had previously been addressed by council and approved, with maybe an exception or two in there, and $100,000 toward the 5-year plan new model is one of those exceptions. Is that so? Based on that, and I am just on my 2 cents in that I'm concerned about the $100,000, and I understand that it's all going to be accounted for and come back, but it really was never staffed to the council to do that. So there's questions I think that might have been addressed in that. They're not addressed, they're not answered. However, now we're taking a good faith that it's going to be coming back to us. I think I need to ask you if 11 and 12, there's a consensus on council to move them forward as they exist. Well, we sure have a lot of provisos in there. And the one that I added also is to what the Mayor Pro Tem was saying is, I think the maintenance is a big deal. I think it's fallen behind. I don't know how we're going to get it properly back on course, but people choose to live in Littleton for a number of reasons, but parks and trails is always at the top, and we better take care of it. And we have some ability to.
That's the level of service issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really agree with also that. So can I ask policy question 11? Do I have a consensus to move it forward with the provisos that we've made clear to the manager?
I'm not sure which provisos we make clear to the manager. Is the manager clear with what we
Well, let's go back, let's look at 11 specifically. Pull that up. Or let's see, nobody's running the computer now.
Is that just Progress Park?
No, it's,
It's Progress Park.
Progress
and-
Park and the 100 grand.
yeah, that's the two pieces. One is phase 2 of Progress Park. And the other is the 100,000 advanced planning.
Yes,
So
correct, Earlene?
the proviso is associated with the 100,000.
Correct, for which we would, I can't remember how I worded that, but specifically, they would not be authorized to expend that until they come back and council approves the list of projects to be designed. Does that sound fair?
So the Progress Park is a continuation of what we've already approved in 2017.
Yes.
So my question is, do we really need to appropriate $100,000 in the open space fund?
You don't have to. You could just leave it there basically in fund balance and have them just come back. That's the other way you could do this. Either way is acceptable. You just might have to, appropriate the funds, obviously, formally later.
And I'll just add that takes 2 readings to appropriate that, so there's a time factor.
That's council's decision.
So if I could get a nod of people that would prefer to see it handled as was just discussed, it's a future twice presented to council reading, and it's not going to be in the budget. The line may be there to fill, but there's no $100,000 in there. Is that the way you prefer to proceed, or?
I'm okay with putting it in as long as the council approves it and we can reflect, probably we can't on the line item, what it really ends up being, can we? It'll just say projects design.
We can split out.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
it's split out.
Yeah, because that's the one downside of putting in placeholders is then in subsequent years, it's hard to go back and figure out what exactly that was used for. And that's part of my concern.
Yeah, I think the line item here, if I'm reading it correctly, Arlene says planning and design for 2019 projects.
Yes, but we can split it out by project names later once we have them.
The other thing we could certainly talk to the city attorney about, I am used to seeing budget provisos in the formal approval ordinance of the budget. So you can list them. So that's another way to capture that formally.
That'd be better.
Yeah, I'd prefer that, to be honest with you, so that there's,
That way you
it's all transparent.
It's a good clarification.
Yeah.
So with that, do we move the policy question forward?
Yes.
Shake, yes.
I'm sideways on this one. It seems to me that we're allocating money, they're not always using this. They just want us to reallocate. I mean, are they doing too much and they're just backburnering Littleton? Because at times I think Littleton's not getting the attention we want. We're allocating money, they're not using it because they'll get it later. So I'm not all that warm about this.
Keith, I think can try to address that.
Yeah, I'll take that one. There's a couple of things here is, as I've talked about with them at the staff level, basically, as the district has grown and the amount of projects that they're trying to deliver has grown, it appears that organizationally they've had a history of, because of the way they're a second-tier funding organization. So their funding comes to them from other organizations like us or the City of Centennial. So what was happening, it appears, is that they were budgeting in a way that they would design projects and try to deliver them in the same year. Which, those of us that deliver projects, we don't do that. It's just not something that we do. And so that was the past practice that they had. And so organizational capacity, they're changing that because they just realized they couldn't get it done. They're right in that transition phase right now. These projects are kind of caught in that transition phase. So they're planned forward, and why they're asking for that design money is so that the 2019 projects can be designed in 2018, so they're ready to be let to contractors early in the year. A second part of this, which I didn't mention earlier, is one of the discussions that I've already started to have with their staff is, with other jurisdictions, they have adopted formal funding contracts. So there's clarity around some of these things about project lists, project priorities, all of those things. They've already done that with Centennial. And I have that agreement, I got that agreement about a week and a half ago. So that's one of the things that they would like to work to, so that these questions about a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight are included in the funding agreement, so we understand how the cycle works, how their planning works, so we're ahead of the game, as opposed to the situation that we're in now, where we're partway through a project, it's been designed, it's partially funded, now they got to roll over to another year. I think it's just, I believe that it's a transition in their organization right now that's going to be changing dramatically moving forward from now. So.
And if I can throw in the numbers side of this, so back on page 161, if you'll all look at that total expenditures line item at the bottom, you can see that we've got a column for our adopted budget for 2017, and then a column for our final budget for 2017. The difference between those two is about $1.1 million, which is pretty much all the projects that we had to carry forward into 2017 that didn't get finished last year. So this year's ending estimate is about $1.1 million. So they're catching up. They're getting the projects done in 2017 that we had budgeted in 2016. And so you can see that they're kind of, we're just trying to fix the way that the money shows up for you guys and for them too, so that it makes more sense, so that you're budgeting it the same year you're spending it, and you're not having $1.1 million of POs that you're having to carry forward year after year. So that our citizens can expect, they know, like, if we're gonna budget it this year, it's gonna be done that year. It's not gonna be done 2 years later. So we're just trying to fix that transparency type thing.
But I would like to say that South Suburban isn't a second-tier funding organization.
They're not.
They're a first-tier funding organization.
Well, for projects like this, they can't always
With
necessarily, yeah.
some of this stuff.
I-
They're collecting their own tax to do
No,
exactly
I
this
get
stuff.
Point taken.
And I'm saying this in the most cooperative tone possible.
Not agreeing in the
Doing a
most
good job for you.
So, still didn't get a consensus on moving it forward. Jerry was lukewarm. I'm still lukewarm. I was waiting to see how.
I'm lukewarm on that 100. I'd move the 250 for progress forward. I don't think we need to do anything with that 100 right now, tonight, in the budget. We can do something as it comes along. I want to get our priority list put together. Or maybe our priority list is getting stuff done that we said we were going to get done. I don't know, but I would rather do that. And we can give them money, we can reappropriate this in May for them.
So let me split it out then. Let's see who would be in favor of bullet point number 1, or the first bullet point, moving that part forward.
Can I make one argument first? I'm leery about it, appropriating placeholder things because it's difficult to track and stuff like this. But the downside of doing major appropriations through the year is it makes it difficult to compare what's happening on a year-to-year basis. Because when we sit down and go through the 2018 budget, what we're really looking at is what was the original 2017 budget. And so if we start having major differences between what we originally approved throughout the year and what's the final budget, then it ends up making it difficult to see what the trends are. So I can go either one. It's $100,000.
And it's the open space budget, it's not the general fund.
Well, this is one of the things where, at least from my perspective, it's not going to go anywhere else. And I'd love to see the proviso become part of the budget component. Therefore, it's not happening as far as the spending, given the proviso.
So you're saying put it in with the proviso?
With the proviso.
I'll go and put it in with
So I think that gives us the movement then on number 11 with all this discussion.
So I have a question. So could we on the 100,000 have the proviso that this planning will be done by August 31 next year? So that when those of us who are still around are sitting here and they're asking for the project money, the plan will be done.
August 31st is probably reasonable. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Good point.
Yeah,
Before the budget season.
yeah, that's exactly budget season.
Okay, on number 2, so we moved 11 forward. Number 12, rather. Number 12 is the one that, just to remind you, it is a number of items that were previously approved, and but it does ask for an additional $80,000 because of the
It's not quite an additional 80,000. There will be 36,000 left over in 2017 that we could appropriate for this project. So that money will not be spent in 2017. So it's really reappropriating the 36,000 and then adding another 44.
And the other items, which are the 2 bullets on that second page, are things that had already been discussed, as was pointed out. I'd like to move that one forward also with the discussions that we've had defined with some of that. But I got to tell you, I want to move it forward because I think we already made the commitment to do them. But I'm just not happy with the way this is all shaking out. So.
Not at all.
No, I'm not either. And another thing that, what fund is that coming out of? Is that coming out of the shareback?
Open space. Yeah.
The
Arapahoe
shareback?
County.
Is there another,
Open space.
there's other, oh, he explained there's other sources in the open space fund.
Yes.
So it's the shareback money?
Well, let's be clear. My understanding is open space is, I guess I should look, is Jeffco and Arapahoe open space tax.
Yes.
And that's it.
That's it. So,
And there's a little bit that comes in from grants that you might get from Arapahoe and
The
there's
Conservation
interest.
Trust is its own.
that's a different
Yes,
fund.
this is not Conservation Trust.
Can that be paid out of something other than share back money?
You mean like the capital fund?
You do Conservation Trust, don't you?
Conservation Trust?
I don't know what the
I mean,
restrictions are.
it just, this is, to Doug's point, this is the kind of thing that just, we just keep pulling tens of thousands of dollars out of what is, that money was never intended to do. Because we need to pave a parking lot, there it is.
I think that project would be a viable project out of the Conservation Trust Fund, but we have to keep in mind that we only get about $215,000, $218,000 a year in that fund. So it is possible. We would just have to look at other projects.
Yeah, because we typically, correct me if I'm wrong, we typically try to look for improvements like the library, the museum, or something, fixing, windows and some of the issues we just talked about here last night.
Well, one of the reasons that,
Then you don't have fund balance in it to do it.
Exactly,
Would you say no?
you don't?
There's not,
There's only 25K at
At
the end of
the end of
2018, as it is right now, so.
We have a bad habit of looking at that open space fund and seeing it in the millions of dollars and just, because the projects that it requires are also millions of dollars. So that's why this prioritization is really important.
I agree with you, because I think from a staff perspective, I certainly don't understand where the council would like to take that within the long term. So that's why we want a 5-year plan for the exact same reasons. So the council gets to decide what's the strategy, what's the priority.
So we just want to say that we don't want to use the same structural engineer we used on Station 12. Third and 10. Much different.
Right.
Okay, so
Make sure we put that on the list.
I'd like to move it forward, see if we're interested. Again, we're all not feeling real comfortable with
Get it
the process
done.
that we've got. So let me see who's a no, I guess. No?
And no, I'm a yes.
Yes?
Okay, I'll do it.
Reluctant.
Yes.
I'm a no.
No. So we have a consensus to move it forward. But I gotta tell you, this is too squishy. The whole thing just
Well,
is not very
This is reminiscent of when the pavement was done, that went over the Corps of Engineers property, that went to the south parking lot.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, where the dollars just,
Disappear.
well, yeah.
I mean, they just, the
gets-
cost
gets-
just
Gets
goes.
sucked. It was a wrong estimate to begin with, but it still needs to be done.
Some of these have been promised to the citizens too. And Bowles Grove is badly in need of renovation. Absolutely. Some of those stuff.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that stuff.
Yeah.
We already have decided to do that. It's this other squishy.
And the question is, and Keith and Mark are probably aware of this, how do you get spot on with every estimate that comes at the front end?
How do you get closer than what just happened?
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly make that a priority for staff here to deal with the 5-year plan for open space.
Okay, so where would you like to take us next? We're up to citywide. Policy question number 13.
This is mine.
We're all yours, sir.
Yes.
So where do we reference? Where do we reference?
Page 127.
127, yes.
31 on the questions.
Yeah, so this is
31 on the policy questions.
It's in general ops.
It is. So the policy
31 or
question is on page 31, and then the actual line item is page 127.
Too many pages, too many jumping.
Question 13.
Yeah. So I'll explain kind of the dilemma here, or the challenge, and this is not going to be news to council here, but you know, this building continues to be a real challenge trying to find appropriate space here for staff. And, you know, this has been an issue for quite some time. Based on where we're at financially, we do not obviously see any kind of serious renovation to this building here for the next, my guess is at least 10 years. So kind of in light of that, we were looking at alternatives to try to create space. And I have to be honest, in my opinion, I really don't like the one-stop shop where it's located. I love the concept, not the location. The staff is frustrated by that location. I can assure you that ever since that got put there, there has been a real problem trying to keep that heated and cooled. It's just the wrong location. And so we've been trying to look at some alternatives of what we could do. We even looked at the lease agreement here for Geneva Lodge. It's about 4 years left on that. We looked at some options at trying to move our Public Works Engineering out to Building 1 in some space and renovating that. I think the answer that, and specifically the policy question, is for us to take what's left of the fire operation, fire prevention, add them to the existing lease down on Mineral, mostly because that staff already doesn't have a deep interaction here with the one-stop shop. They do have a couple of staff that do participate in the development review process periodically, but of all the options, this one's the least disruptive to the staff by moving the balance of fire down to Mineral, and therefore opens up that space on the second floor. So at that point, then we'd be able to kind of move some of the offices around, take the one-stop shop out of this hallway, probably combine them with the rest of community development, and so that all the community developments, all the planners, all the engineers are all in basically one location, more convenient, quite honestly, for the public. And to do this here would, a lease of about $40,000 a year would have to be added to the existing facility down on Mineral. We've also estimated roughly $75,000 in furniture. I have to admit we do not have a firm estimate for that. That's probably on the high end. The furniture that's out here for the one-stop shop is the exact style that we've been using in the other places. So the intent with that is to try to reuse what's out front, but we're not confident in that. So I think that is a high estimate. Our rough estimate is probably something more like 50. But I have to tell you that that furniture is expensive. So I don't want to under-promise this. So that's why.
Loungers or this?
Pardon me?
Any Barca loungers or?
Yeah, this is basically just modular furniture.
That steel case stuff is like made out of gold.
It is. And this is all off state bid, by the way. So we use state bid to acquire that. So that's the least cost for us. So this is an opportunity to try to make an improvement in this building. Quite honestly, I do think it influences the morale in this organization based on the way we're structured in these different offices, and that is true, not to be underestimated. So this is an opportunity to kind of put this back in a different place and really improve the functionality of this building.
I would prefer to look at 2 other alternatives first. I'm not opposed to finding space for it, but my understanding is Dave Fisher is trying to get out of his lease on the remaining year or so in Geneva Village, the lodge. And my recollection is that was done in like 97 or 98. It was a 20-year lease. So we should be very close to that coming up. And that's 7,000 square feet. We've got I think we've got some space in the second floor of the courthouse. I know we've got the historic courtroom on the second floor, and I don't think we're doing any historic trials, so.
It is used on occasion.
Is it?
It's in the meeting room. It is.
Okay, well, that's not option, and that's not option. I'd like to get some figures on Geneva.
Be happy to, if that's what council would like.
But yes, I agree with you. I think having them out there is not vital.
I'd like to find a solution to that. The staff is frustrated by it.
I would be.
Additional comments?
Well, the question I would ask is, some of this is furniture and some of it is lease.
Yes.
Each of those may go down in this. So given that the numbers may change in looking at
Not the lease. Okay. The lease is solid. That number is very solid.
Well, but I'm saying if we used alternate space and it was the lot.
That's true. If we didn't, yeah, right.
So that's what I'm saying, is
Okay.
each one of these,
So the 75 may be the same, but the 40 may go away.
right?
Or if we have to buy it out,
It's possible.
or maybe the same amount, but they're on the same campus. So,
Be happy to look at some other options if that's what council is preference.
now,
Yeah, I'm not sure it changes the question in front of us.
yeah, I'm, once again, I'm okay with approving 13, putting the 40 grand and the 75 grand in the budget, and then having you come back with us with,
Some alternatives?
yeah, some alternatives.
I'd appreciate that, yeah. I'm fine too.
Basically takes the last three words on Mineral Avenue out and leaves it over
Yeah,
to you to figure
yeah.
out. I'm really in support of that too. My recollection is like yours, Doug. His lease is very reasonable over there. Buying him out is well within a world that we could work with, given the numbers you're talking about. So,
I haven't been in the building for a while, but it was a dump before they moved in, that's for sure.
Oh, they-
And now
It's
it's great.
top.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's an architect.
That's what I presume is, well, I know some architects that
Like a magic
don't
house.
have some places that aren't that nice. But yeah, so I'm assuming it's still in great shape from when they.
I have been in it, it will likely need some work, but I think for the most part, it's doable.
Speaking of windows, they have lots of windows.
They do.
So if we're talking about people getting chilly.
It's gonna be the mayor's office down there. Okay, so comfortable moving it forward, everyone? Okay, that brings us to policy question number 14. Or whatever's next on your list, there it is.
Nonprofits.
Nonprofits?
So Kelly's gonna,
This is our deal.
yes, Kelly's gonna walk us through this process. You should have a packet, and then of course I'll take it from here.
Hi, Council. I'm not sure there's any walking through this. It probably is more like plodding along. We are all aware there's a great need in our community for a variety of different kinds of services.
Oops.
Rainey also needs help. As you can see, what we tried to do at the bottom of this spreadsheet, I think you all have a hard copy. These are all organizations that have new requests for 2018 funding. One thing I want to point out in the column that says approved 2017, those were all approved where it says subtotal of $73,000. Actually, what was approved was $88,000. If you look up above to Arapahoe House, the $15,000 that council approved was not provided to Arapahoe House. The chief of police knows a little bit more about that. But at some point after the funding was approved, that organization, I believe, ceased to exist and transitioned into another organization, and that's for detox services. And I always thought that was an odd thing to be in sort of this nonprofit grants, because that's something that I don't think we really have any sort of choice in providing that when the police detain somebody who needs that kind of help. And so that's being funded separately by police. So what was actually approved in 2017 was $88,000. What was actually spent was the $73,000 you see.
88 or 84?
73,000 plus 15,000
So
being 88.
So the funding for a detox destination for people that the police pick up is now in the police fund?
That's correct, Chief?
Yes, can't tell you how much that is though, sorry.
Okay,
But it's being taken care of.
all right.
So,
We paid Arapahoe House as well, but that was a supplemental request that they had on top of what we already paid. And then in the fall of last year, they sent out a letter stating they were getting out of the detox business.
Sorry, Chief, I think you're gonna have to come up here just for the record.
Speak into the
Yeah, you have to maybe,
Speak into the microphone.
yeah, start over here, I'm sorry.
Speak to the ceiling.
So fall of last year. So the issue with the decision not to contribute the $15,000 last year was that Arapahoe House got out of the detox business, and they kind of left a number of law enforcement agencies kind of hanging. And so with little option and throughout the metro area, those services have since been taken over by another entity. Aurora Mental Health Center is covering those services for the east part of the city. And so we are now working with them and are no longer working with Arapahoe House.
So when fire picks up somebody that needs to be detoxed, do they call the police or do they take them themselves to someplace?
No, Chris, we usually get the detox calls and then they're medically cleared and then we'll transport them.
So,
So
the
did they
actual amounts.
request $15,000 this year?
No, that's a mistake. That should not be in there.
There's nothing there. Is that a zero? I would assume it should be a zero.
That should be a zero. Sorry about that. Good catch.
Is that in the total at the bottom then?
It probably is if that's a spreadsheet, Erling.
Yes, it was, I updated it
Okay.
just now.
Look at that.
Read.
Oh, I thought it was a zero. Dang.
84.
Good catch. So with that, it's council's decision as to which organizations you want to fund. We've tried to streamline this process by creating a pretty simple, slightly over one-page application. It used to be a free-for-all. People would just send all kinds of stuff, and we tried to make it shorter and simpler and more consistent for you to review. So I will be happy to try to answer any questions about any of these organizations if I can. I know about some of them. I don't know about all of them, but I know a little bit. One of the things that, maybe as a side note, that Mark and I have talked about, there's a group of citizens that have sort of formed a small subcommittee out of the Littleton Leadership Retreat. And they've seen what we've done with the marketing partners, and they're very interested in pursuing a similar kind of formula for the not-for-profits in Littleton, because it seems as though there are a lot of not-for-profits, and they're all doing very good work, but there's not really a network where they can communicate with one another and be aware of the kind of services each other provides. And that's kind of what the Aging Well Resource Center does for senior services, but as we're all aware, there's a great need for other kinds of services in the community. So Mark and I have talked about that. We've met with that group. I've met with Tim Nims about it. And what we've told them is we might like to try to get together with them after the first of the year and see how we might help facilitate a group similar to the marketing partners, where the city sort of tries to bring everyone together in a summit, and then they can forge relationships with one another so they can become more acquainted with one another and partner and work together in service
I'm not familiar
delivery.
with marketing partners, I'm sorry.
That's a group that we do. We meet every other month. We just met Tuesday. We just saw that all kinds of different groups within the city were doing different kinds of marketing and events, but they weren't really talking to each other, and people were doing events at the same time with similar themes, and we thought, there's got to be a lot of ways that these groups can partner with one another. So it includes everyone from the hotels in Littleton to Hudson Gardens, the Downtown Merchants, Alamo Draft House, the school district. It's free, anybody can come. What we do is we just try to keep it going, and we move the meeting around every other month. We met Tuesday morning at Rocker Spirits, but we drank coffee and had fruit. And the View House is going to host our next one. And Hudson Gardens has hosted it. We've met at the hotels. We're just trying to bring people together to work cooperatively with one another.
Well, maybe a couple years ago, you put together a breakfast with that group and had council attend up in the police training room. Maybe something like that again to bring everybody up to date of what is going on, because that was very, very good to learn everything that was going on, and that was when you kind of had started. It'd be good that would be, I think, good to do.
We'd be happy to do it. That'd be great.
So is the end result that we have like a clearinghouse or a list of all the nonprofits and the services available in Littleton? And do they
Possibly.
come out of the library?
Well, if I may, I think this Human Service Summit, I've mentioned this to council a couple of times. I have kind of bounced this off of some other community leaders here. There's gaining a lot of interest in this issue. I think I raised it first just in the whole issue of homelessness, some of the challenges that we've had personally. We kind of manage that, but obviously, that's an issue we cannot solve by ourselves. But I think this is, we're starting to try to get some kind of definition to this, but one of the outcomes could be basically a list of the human services that are provided in our community, and certainly at some level of coordination, so that we're not duplicating or tripping over ourselves.
I think those questions come up frequently enough, like food banks, churches would have volunteers that want to get involved, but they don't know what to do. So it'd be nice to have a focal point, like expand maybe the Aging Well Resource Center to something a little broader than that. So
I can tell you when, I know this was something the mayor was very involved with, but when the Southview Place fire happened, the enormity of the need for that population, I think, was...
It exceeded all expectations.
Thank you.
It's still there.
It's
All
not
preparation's still there.
It's not really
But that's not, we're not considering any of that tonight.
No, but with that transition, Love Inc. was very helpful. They're first on your list. So Love Inc. was very, I was not familiar with them at all, but I know that they provide a lot of service to the seniors who were displaced by that fire. So if you want to take these one at a time.
Yeah, let me give some context. Maybe we take it, if you want to lead it one at a time.
I'd like to just throw out the ones that I'd really like to see happen first, and then go from there.
Okay, how do you want to do that then, Jerry? You want to name some that absolutely need to be on the list?
Right off the bat, I would say.
Okay, I'm good with that.
So Tiffany has she's got the spreadsheet, so she'll be able to plug those numbers in.
This is approval voting, don't tell anyone.
Thank you. Sorry, I was looking at it.
right, realistic.
Jerry, what do you want to do?
So right off the bat, there's three organizations I want to see us hit. And that would, first of all, that would be Doctors Care, North Littleton Promise, and Meals on Wheels. Those are the three that are very important especially to our northeast quadrant of our city.
Sorry, Doctors Care, North Littleton Promise, and who? Meals on Wheels?
Meals on Wheels. Okay. Those are all important because we have a lot of folks over there that are lower income and seniors, and the Meals on Wheels are real important to a lot of folks.
And Doctors Care, are we still funding now the community development block grants? Is part of that?
I think we are, aren't we?
Yes.
We are?
Yes.
So we're doing like 55 or 80 or something out of there.
I believe it's 22,000.
Is it 22?
I believe so.
So this would be in addition to that 20.
And I'm okay with doing an addition to that. I tell you, for what they do, the folks over in that part of our city,
Well, and
it is needed.
And what they've been doing is they've
Well,
expanded
they serve
their...
everyone, don't they? Do they only serve the North?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
Oh,
not
yeah,
just-
they come from all over.
It's not just Littleton, but what they've done is part of their strategy, because I was on the strategy committee with them, and they've expanded their services to include dental care and have practitioners in that area. So I'll agree with everyone that's on Jerry's list. At least one that I would add is also All Health Network and how they work with us. And side comment on the Human Services Summit. It would be great if the county provided that navigation service across all of this, but they're strapped. And as we found with the Aging Well Resource Center, there's an unmet need in just navigating to where those services come from. And so I want to put an exclamation point on the summit and in working with the county in addition to the nonprofits to see that can happen. But there's a big issue, and this is where our social worker that works with the police department comes from is All Health. And
I'm okay with All Health, man.
okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay, unless you have an objection, we got 4 so far. Anybody else like to throw some out?
Humane Society.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so Debbie, you're up, Humane Society?
No.
Mrs. Sutherland.
Well, that's fine. I think it's very important that we have a humane society and that it's functioning. We have a contract with them, don't we, through the police for taking animals there?
Yes.
I guess my preference would be to put this over in police and increase it as part of the contract item rather than as a nonprofits.
Well, I would suggest we don't because they're the way that being a nonprofit, they receive funding from different pools,
Matching.
but they also, yeah. So then this, when they ask for this, they're using it to provide a specific service in the Littleton community that would be specifically for spay and neuter, education for kids, training. They're going to do training sessions. And the fee that we pay them, it's a per animal thing. So they have kind of what our regular, about the same number of animals every year, and that is what that fee is based on. So just throwing another $4,500 at it would not.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and it's just, one note I would make on this one, Kelly, is it seems on their application they have in here what Inglewood Police is paying for their contract services as a funding source, and yet they haven't included what Littleton is paying for some of the
I saw
contracts.
that.
And so that may be a discussion to have with them. I don't have an issue with the request.
I do have a question on here, though. So, some of them are asking for additional funding, and in the past, I think we've been pretty concerned about growing these, trying to keep them a little bit contained.
So far, everybody's the same.
Well, Gateway, you got Vega asking
No,
for
I mean,
double.
the ones that we've approved so far.
Right, but just kind of overall, is that,
Let's at least approve the organization as a must-have, then we can go back and tweak it.
yeah, that's true,
Yeah.
okay.
It's a good idea.
But they have given us this drive last year.
Anybody like to bid an organization?
Who's up?
I'll make a pitch for Metro Mayor's Youth Commission Board.
Yes, that's it. It's a small amount.
It's a small amount.
It's,
Kids at the honor is amazing.
in my experience, and I don't know Bruce in the last 2 years, but there's always students from the Littleton high schools
Yes.
that are
I'm good
receiving.
with that one.
Did we pick Love Inc.? Do we have Love Inc.?
We
No,
have not said
no.
Love Inc.
No.
Love Inc.?
Love Inc.? I'd support Love Inc. Big time.
Same.
I'd also do Arapahoe Rescue Patrol. Those guys are amazing.
Yep, that's one of mine. I have that.
Are they still in Station 12?
They're amazing.
They really are.
I can't say enough about them. We work with them on a lot of different events. I know police and fire do too.
What about Gateway Domestic
In
Violence?
it's the city's adopted component, which is the Integrated Family Community Services, used to be Interfaith. I think that they at least, there's a number of food banks, but they're the ones that is the most publicly accessible for folks in what they do. So I make a pitch for.
Go ahead, Ron.
Do you
Gateway
want that
Domestic
at
Vi-
the 2017 level or 2018
I'll go with the
request?
2018 right now.
I'll go with 2018 too.
So on this is what?
Yeah, anybody else go for 2018? For
I'm
the
good.
2018
The
value?
integrated family.
Right.
What's our total right now?
72 Fords.
So we want to make sure we continue the in-kind, like historic downtown Littleton merchants,
Oh, that's
from Welcome Week, obviously. But Gateway Domestic Violence, I'd like to see in there. And I'd like to make a comment about the Littleton Crabapple route. I think that's neat in the long term. The idea is to be able to see crab apples from down at the light rail station. There's so much junk in the way you can't see it. So I don't really have a great need to fund it this year until they get that cleared out of the way. And then I think it's another question.
Well,
Could we come
I,
back to?
you know, isn't this one a little bit of, you know, what comes first on some of this? But one of the things that I like about the Littleton Crabapple is it's something that supports our neighborhoods.
I agree.
And I'd love to see it be included if we can find the space.
But what they're asking for is more irrigation for crab apples that would be new that you see from the light rail station. I think that's wonderful. I think it's a great thing to see, but you can't see it. You could put searchlights up there. You can't see through the stuff that's in the way. There are all kinds of weed trees and that kind of stuff. So,
I think what they're looking for the irrigation isn't this. I think that's a separate
is that right? Okay.
expenditure.
I heard they wanted $15,000 for that.
They had prepared kind of a 5-year plan. And I'm sorry, I don't remember specifically what this number was for.
This, I think,
1,500.
they're scheduled as a scheduled public appearance for your council meeting next week. I think to talk about longer term. I think this particular request is related to just assisting with the purchase of trees.
So the other thing is the irrigation system for the crab apples on top of the railroad is something separate that we haven't seen yet.
Okay.
They wanted it to come out of open space.
But this is for trees.
This is
That's
just
what Larry
to
said.
purchase trees.
I talked to Larry.
Well, and what's nice about this is it is being matched on a corporate basis. So we're doing a 50.
They're coming in front of you. Staff has had many discussions with them over the last couple of months because there's no formalized plan or agreement with them. And we have asked to develop that with them, including funding sources. And they want to expand beyond the crabapple route into areas that were not designated in the crabapple route, including areas that are managed by South Suburban and our naturalized and wild areas, and into areas managed by the railroad where we do not have access. So that's part of the discussion that will take place. This is exclusively for tree purchases, but there is a great deal of other discussion because there is no long-term master plan or plan around the work that they would like to do, as well as the city spends a significant amount of funding in our grounds and landscape budget to maintain and irrigate the existing stuff, and we have no plan for how we're addressing that, and we have asked to work with them on that approach.
Let's hear what they have to say.
So, moving it forward today, are we in favor of that?
I am, because they have to replace some of the trees that are out there.
I'm in favor.
I'd like to wait because I actually might like to give more once, because I went and heard the big spiel and whatever, and it sounded mighty impressive to me. So it seems to me if we hear the presentation, the public hears it, then I certainly support at least this much. I probably support more than this much because of what I think that could do to that whole strip there. And even though you can't see that from certain places, you can see it from other places.
Just this particular strip in question, we don't have control over, and we would need to get an agreement from the railroad to address this.
But that's not what we're looking at tonight, though. We're just looking at 15.
Yeah, but
For trees.
we don't know where they're going to plant them. We don't know. I mean, I think we have to wait on this part, you know, and I think the other thing is $1,500, where might that go if we were to give it to Doctor's Care as opposed to buying crabapple trees? I mean, I think at some point there, you know, is this a human services effort with or some, you know, if it's about, you know, curb appeal, that's a different consideration, but we've got a whole list of things here that are.
Just move on to others then. Human services.
So I had a number of people that did want to move it forward, so I didn't get the count.
Not me.
So that's a no. Jerry said move it forward, I'm gonna move it forward.
You got 4.
Okay, so it's moving forward with the 1,500, and we'll see the presentation and see what it all means. And,
So I want to do spirit dinner.
LPS Foundation.
Question for Kelly, the Arapahoe County Community College dinner or
That's the one.
scholarship luncheon. We buy a table. The last few years, how many, do we fill the table up? Who ends up going?
I think I was,
In all honesty, I have no idea. Mike Broughton was on the foundation board, and he kind of focused on the college, I focused on the school district, so I don't know.
Phil?
I went,
That's it?
well,
We
one of
buy
the
a
things,
table?
For which one?
The college,
the table gets
College.
filled. It's-
ACC.
And what it does is it actually helps support some of the students that are scholarship recipients sit at the tables. And so we've had two, at least this last year, we had two recipients at the table.
But you have an asterisk by them for, okay, Arapahoe Community College, because we jumped two different things. Arapahoe Community College Foundation, you have an asterisk by the 2018 number there.
They did not apply?
They did not apply?
Okay, that's easy.
So,
Yeah, conversation over.
well, I think they were told that they didn't need to. They were good to go. So I kind of took this program over in the spring when Mike left. So I think in the case of the College Foundation and the Downtown Merchants, they were told it was okay, they didn't need to. But so we're telling them they do need to next year. So
So next year they might get it.
that'd
So-
be your choice.
So who wants to move Arapahoe Community College Foundation forward? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it moves forward. Okay, anybody else would like to?
I said spirit dinner.
And then,
That's where we're,
that's where we're at, yeah. Spirit dinner, absolutely, same amount of money. You all in favor of that?
Yeah, sure.
And
Okay,
then the 3 events that you support with in-kind sponsorship are the Western Welcome Week Parade, the Main Street Block Party, and the Littleton Stride.
Yes.
so going down the list, the ones that have not popped up yet, just to keep this moving. Arapahoe Santa Claus Shop has not popped up. Any interest in that?
Dollars here.
I like that, but I think they've moved, they're much more remote now.
They work out on the other side of the county, or around the other part of the
So
county.
I
They
don't-
had a real hard time finding space. They sort of need warehouse space for all those toys, and they had a real hard time finding space that they could afford.
So it didn't seem like Vega was telling us why they were doubling their request.
Because every time that the delegation comes here, so in 2018, the Australians will be coming here, so mark your calendars, they'll be coming.
They'll need to support their.
Yeah,
I think it's something.
So they always ask
Yes.
for more money during
That's
the year
why
that
the other
they
year
visit.
it's always, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm good at 600.
They're upset.
So
I forgot about that. That's
So Vigo, are we in favor
Yeah.
of Vigo?
Vigo's
Okay. Santa Claus Shop, I didn't get a
I'm a
warm
no.
and fuzzy.
Not right now.
I'm not getting a warm and fuzzy.
It's in the North Pole.
Okay. Rocky Mountain Stroke Center. That's a Bannock in the Boulevard and serves a lot of people, but you look at their numbers, it's not that, it is a little part of Littleton.
What's our bottom line now?
Boy, it's,
99.
83. Oh, sorry.
45?
You know, boy, stroke centers are important.
Yeah, boy.
I mean, we consistently give them $1,000, maybe that instead of the 2,500.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
15, I don't know.
Let's go ahead, mark it as 1,000. I'm good with that.
1,000.
I'm hearing 1,000, any others,
1,001.
1,000?
Yeah, if they help people recover from strokes and stay in their houses.
That's what they do.
And they serve families too.
So we're comfortable with keeping it at the previous 1,000.
Possibly increase.
84.
85.5.
85,500.
So what's our total number we're searching for?
So with that, we're done. Unless there's anything down below.
Yeah.
Nothing. All right.
Okay, anybody have anything jump up on the ones down below besides the Crabapple Trail? I'm not hearing it. We're done with that one.
Ma'am.
Thank you, council.
Go ahead, take a break.
Geez, you are so demanding.
Okay, 5-minute break. 5-minute break.
Well, it's good to have a poll.
Okay, we've returned from our break. We're continuing with our budget discussions. And during the break, I learned that one of the ones that we had not approved on that previous list was the Santa Claus shop. And there was an interest by the majority of council members to include that $800 because it was one of the only ones that we had on there that specifically targeted underprivileged kids. And it was appropriate to keep that.
In Littleton?
Yes, that's what I believe. So,
Are they still serving Littleton? Because they are a long way away from here.
Yeah, but they transport them over. Yeah, the families.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
they do families.
I'm good with that.
I believe the delivery happened to go away.
What?
The
So I believe
deliveries
the delivery
worldwide.
And on one night a year, Doug has a.
Oh, for God's sake.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, well, we do have a
Slay.
we'd have to move that forward.
Good.
Okay, that brings us to the city manager's agenda on this pad there. And the next item is to talk about this one that had come up during our discussions, and it's the incentives.
Correct. So Tiffany's actually going to have a little bit of an update. Again, a question raised by council last night.
Council, I apologize, I don't have a slide for the incentives, but I just wanted to let you know that on page 127, there are a couple of line items that are related to Urban Renewal Authority and tax incentive agreements. So for 2018, the tax incentive agreement estimate is about $100,000, and then for the Urban Renewal Authority, it's $60,000. I'm kind of limited in the amount of information I can provide on the incentive agreements, but what I can tell you is that the city currently has 3. There's only 2 that are active. One of those will be falling off in 2018. They will be meeting the limit that they had.
That's King Supers.
No.
No, okay.
And then the other one that's active currently will likely not meet the $500,000 limit by the end of the period, just for your reference.
And you're not telling us who?
King Supers is the one that is expected not to meet the $500,000.
Yeah, I would think it would be proprietary because it was a public meeting where we
Right.
agreed
I
to
just
do it.
can't give specific tax dollars.
Oh, yeah, no, it's okay.
Right.
That's all right.
I'm good. Tax groceries, so.
What page was that again?
127.
Thank you.
And then for the Urban Renewal Authority, just for your information, Columbine Square is still the active urban renewal, and they do continue to collect sales tax, and there is an increment that is shared with the authority.
And that 60 grand is just sales tax, just from Columbine Square, just the increment.
Right, from the base, yes.
But it's not just Columbine Square, it's the triangle of shopping.
Columbine
There
Square
is-
area, yes. It's not Columbine Square, it's a plan. It's a plan. What line items are we looking? I see urban renewal.
The one above that is tax incentive
Okay,
agreements.
that's the ones. Okay. Thank you. I want the 170.
And the third agreement that is open but is not active currently is an energy corporation, which is 4O Energy. That was the question.
Sorry, who is it?
4O Energy.
Say again?
4O?
4O.
F-O-R-O.
Oh.
F-O-R-O.
F-O-R-O.
Tiffany, where are the historic preservation incentives?
That, I believe, is in the community development permit. What's that, I'm sorry? Yes. Um, 7461 on page 109. There's a historic preservation tax refund, is that the one you're referring to?
No, they're grants. What page, Johnson?
I need my ruler.
And you all laughed at me.
We laughed with you, Jerry. With you.
Yeah, it's always
I think it was the
That's
evil
all right.
sense that we
Yes,
had with
that's
you.
right.
I was laughing at you.
That's okay, I laughed in front of you and back of you. All right.
So on page 107, there, under line item 7461 is Main Street Historic District.
Yeah, that's it.
327, 461, there it is.
Yes. And the amount in 2018 is 50,000.
Whoa, what the heck was that? Jeez. Are you all right, man? We got the paramedic in the house?
So we need to take another break.
So 7461, 107 in the grants.
Yes.
And 109 is the,
Wait a minute, what are you saying?
The Main Street Historic
Yeah,
District
Oh, there we
grants
go.
yeah,
is on page 107.
yeah. Oh, no, back to
First year we said
107.
25.
It was what then?
Line item 7461, and it's $50,000.
Thank you.
and the tax is on
Page 109,
109.
same line item, 7461,
Grants? What, what's,
or 75.
Good question.
And if you have questions on that, we may have to defer to Jocelyn.
Oh, in that case, no questions. Oh, Tim is here, I would have. Sorry, Johnson.
You will know of again.
Any other concerns? Any other concerns about incentives or grants or those kinds of things?
No, thank you for that.
Okay, so this brings us up to the discussion that is really the first one for Wednesday night. So we're moving along, but we've already discussed quite a lot of this already last night. This is going to be a discussion of the unfunded priorities.
So if I may, I'm just going to describe some of the work that the staff had done over here for the last few months, putting the budget together, and we're trying to balance this. You know, there's just several things that we just could not move forward here for council consideration. So I do want to pause on some of this here in case the council had some questions about some of this. So there were a series of staff requests that we looked at, both as full FTEs and some as temporary staff. And so there's a list up here on the screen of some of that. I commented last night on the first two. I want to just kind of add a little more discussion there. Chief may have to back me up here, but the fire inspectors, this is an issue where we've identified a need here to increase our level of effort in inspecting a lot of our commercial buildings here for our fire codes. And this is a very typical process here that all fire departments do, and we have a deficiency to address. This is a very significant issue here for our fire partners. They have asked us to consider this as quickly as possible. And so staff's been in the process of kind of assembling a lot of the data and information here so that the council can kind of see what the real issue is here. We would be suggesting a fee structure to go with this to pay for those inspections. And I think one of our challenges is the revenue that we would be collecting obviously would be going into our TABOR calculation. So I think one of the concerns I certainly have is that we add more revenue here, specifically through the fire partners. I think we just have to recognize that this will be, subject to TABOR. And I just don't want to get into a position here without a real strategy when we add additional service like this and revenue, that we just simply don't want to have to refund this over time. So I think that's the piece that staff's kind of working through at the moment here, looking at some alternatives for that. The second piece here that our partners really want us to consider is basically a recommendation coming out of the master plan that all of us, the partners, adopted here a couple of years ago. And there was a suggestion here to kind of add battalion chiefs here because the span of control currently is really at a level that's not recommended for the plan. We're covering a lot of that responsibility now in overtime. So that's kind of a very brief description of those two. if you have more questions about that, certainly the chief's here to kind of help with some of that. I wasn't intending to get into the real detail because we don't have a lot of information yet on that. It would be something coming to you later.
So did I understand you to say one of the issues with the fire inspector stuff is the revenue that might put us over Tabor?
Well, it would be added to the Tabor calculation, and I just want to make sure that we, as staff, have a good understanding.
So is it possible, probably isn't, but is it possible if we charge to let that, instead of coming to us, be a donation to some organization?
Well, I think we are looking at some alternatives here about how each jurisdiction may manage that independently. So right now our IGA with the partners really doesn't allow that, but so we're trying to analyze all options, and unfortunately we just, as part of the budget process, we're just not far enough along to tell you
That's
any
okay,
kind
I
of
just
recommendation.
thought I'd throw that out,
Yeah.
because we just struggled about trying to help some organizations, and if there's a way that somehow that can just be donated.
Well,
Smells like Guido to me, I don't know why. Yeah, we'll approve it, but you gotta donate.
No, it's a charter inspector, but they may have to.
Sounds like Jerry to me.
So, when the partners ask for something, that's a really significant issue, and we need to respect that.
yes.
And we are really caught in a bind on the budget, as we've talked about. But we had talked about, once we got through this year, we looked at the fund balances, we looked at how the year closed out in that May or whenever that was, April.
Yeah.
That might be a time, we might formally, as a council, say we want to reconsider that, those two, especially because they did come from the fire partners, and we just can't entertain them today.
Yeah, that's my view, and I think to take the fire inspectors as an example, there's some kind of notification, even if everybody decides we're going to do this, notification to the business owners about this kind of a program will certainly be essential, I think, in communicating the issue. So we just have some issues to walk through here with the council, and we just didn't have time here in preparation for the budget. I do want to comment just on some of the other FTEs that are in here. I think if you look at the list.
Well, just to echo
Yes.
what the
Yes.
mayor said is both of these are important, particularly the one that deals with safety in our commercial building.
Yeah.
And, there's been growth in business locations, so it seems like it might be something natural to have growth in the fire marshal's capacity to deal with this. So,
I have instructed, of course, the staff to kind of start producing the information here, so we're moving forward with it. If you look at that list there, you can see just about every single department here has had, some challenges here. Certainly the finance department, there's a lot of things we would like a budget analyst in the finance department. Eventually, I would really like to move that direction. A management analyst in the city manager's office would really be a goal of mine. There's a significant body of work here that I really would like to be able to have somebody tasked with that here to kind of raise the depth of information we provide the council. Police department with their accreditation administrator, code enforcement, demands, police, code enforcement, combination inspector, senior planner. I think Jocelyn has done a great job trying to put together a budget here that carries us into 2018. And when she, I can't remember her exact words. I think she said, "We're busy." I can assure you, it is really a difficult process right now for us. It is a heavy load. Both community development and public works we're having to use consultants to plug the gap. So what you're seeing here is just basically a list of staff that we'd like to put in place, but just based on where we're at in the general fund, we just thought it would be best to take some other approaches. We kind of moved down into some of the other operational requests. I just kind of looking through a lot of that, you can see that, this is all over the board. Landscaping, I think Keith Reister kind of touched on that. I think this is really an issue that, as we talk about the level of service and the priority-based budgeting system, we're going to have to identify that. That's a good example where there is a high expectation, and so we just need to kind of connect with council to reaffirm where we're at. But right now, there's just based on where we're at financially, it just was difficult to justify that moving forward. So with that, if there are some questions, we have the department directors here. If you have some issues that you wanted to talk about here as far as the operational side, I'd be more than happy to do that, but that's just kind of a general review.
I have a question regarding community development staffing. And I don't guess you probably have an analysis on this, but if you have an idea, what kind of revenue losses do we suffer by not having?
Funny you should ask. We're going to talk about that. You're going to see that. We actually have a presentation here about trying to raise the revenues here for on the development review side, and you got a packet of information that kind of shows you where we're at with our peer group. But they've actually, Public Works and Community Development have assembled some information to show you some examples of what we've collected in a given year for revenue relative to development review, what our actual cost is, and then what the proposed rate increases, what that would look like. And I can assure you, I can't remember what percentage, but it's like less than 20% is what we're recovering.
Well, that plus, I'm also thinking in terms of when someone's going through the process, and we've had some large-scale developments, and if it takes 6 months to get through because we're shorthanded.
Oh, yeah.
So by the time that the use tax comes in, or the impact fee, or the permit fees come in, that if we hadn't been shorthanded, maybe that would have happened 2 or 3 months sooner. So is there a place at which by not staffing that appropriately, we're actually losing money?
Great question, actually. And I think that's a discussion that we, the department directors, we've been having here, quite honestly, for over a year. Because I think that what we're seeing is we're pushing the threshold of the existing staff. That's why you've seen in the budget this year and then what's proposed in 2018, hiring consultants to kind of fill that gap. It's because we do not have the resource in-house for that. And both Keith and Jocelyn probably touched on this, but the challenge is trying to decide what's the future really hold here. Do we really want to hire our staff internally, full-time? Can we maintain that? We see the growth maintaining. If we think it's going to peak out at some point, then consultants tend to be probably more reasonable.
Do you see a time frame, Mark, in being in a position to bring this back with additional information as well as a insight into the crystal ball?
I think, quite honestly, in my opinion, that by the middle of next year, I think we're going to have a lot more information about our costs, what we'll likely see here with some major developments here that whether it's Littleton Village or Santa Fe Park or others, where I think we'll have a better conversation. So today it's a little difficult, but I can tell you we are stretched and there's pressure. So I think we're doing everything we can here with the use of consultants to try to maintain that, but it's a fair question. Unless Keith or Jocelyn have more to add.
And just my personal experiences, I know how the inspectors are stretched.
That's the advertisement brought to you by.
How do you like that,
Yes, I know your circumstance, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. My recommendation is that we try to update the council on the status of all that here probably by mid-year.
Put it on the calendar.
Yeah.
I have a question on the inspection part, not on the fire inspection, but on the other inspectors. Are we being practical on what we should inspect? For instance, when I got solar panels, the city insisted on inspecting to see if I had CO detectors inside my house. Had nothing to do with the panels. I talked to an architect the other day, and he was experiencing the same thing, a different thing, where they wanted to inspect an existing structure, but all what they were doing was actually doing some additions. I mean, do we need to look at, are we making them busy on stuff they don't need to be busy on?
Well, my suggestion would be that we bring an issue like this back at a study session so the council, we can talk more about the inspection piece, and especially if we have more information about kind of trends in our costs. So I think I'd certainly, we would welcome that conversation.
And we probably need to look at the permits along with that, because we started permitting decks and hence started inspecting decks, and I'm not sure that that's something that rises to the level of needing a permit and inspection, but.
Actually, I know.
Yeah.
I know someone who thanked us. If you have a second floor deck.
Right.
You know.
That's on the deck.
Yes.
But I think it's a fair question. This probably deserves more conversation here, talk about how we approach all that. We do have a new chief building official, and I'm sure Jocelyn would love to introduce Bill. So maybe there's an opportunity in the near term to kind of talk through some of those issues.
Now, building official's name, Bill.
His chief building official is named Bill
Hammer.
Not Bill.
Tracy.
Tracy.
I'm disappointed.
Bill Tracy.
Okay.
There was a last name.
Hammer. An inspector named Hammer.
I had a handyman named Hammer, Mark Hammer.
Okay, let's get back on track.
MC Hammer.
A comment I have is, if I could have my druthers and we were to hire some additional personnel, I really believe code enforcement needs a lot of help. And I think it's because we're an aging community. I believe there's opportunities for properties to be, left unattended. And that really is an affecting issue that I've been addressed to by a lot of citizens, because we're just not really proactive in that arena. But, I understand we don't have that, but if times were a little better, I'd be here asking you to look into that position.
A question for you on this one, Bruce, which is our general approach, and Jocelyn can probably adjust, is to be reactive.
Yeah.
At least residential properties, and be reactive. That would be quite a change, is to move into a proactive stance on that. Wow.
Yeah, and that's what I think we need a philosophy change, and here's the...
And I'm not saying wow is shock. I'm saying wow, that's but that's 180.
But for years in the law enforcement arena, we looked at the broken window theory. If a window's broken and nobody cares about it, another window gets broken next to it, and then pretty soon the whole building's got some kind of problem. I believe that's an issue for the community, and I think we need to move to a proactive stance on it. It has to do with cars on the streets. It has to do with just the whole area of residential, some multifamily areas. It just has to do with making Littleton special, and there's just a need to do that.
Well, for me, I'm thinking, code inspection or enforcement, of course, but I think the first two, I think, are paramount that we take care of that. That is our task for the city, make sure we have proper fire of inspectors and battalion chiefs to make sure things are going. I see those as paramount, and then, as well as the code enforcement. But those two have got to happen, the first two.
Well, we're going to have more conversation about the first two here, just to honor the request of our partners. I don't know the exact schedule, but we've started assembling the information.
Great. Excellent.
Okay, unless there's any other questions, we'll move on to the next category, which is unfunded capital. And maybe as a refresher, you could hand out the 5-year plan. I think we've got this is a copy. You've seen this before, but this is our fiscally constrained 5-year capital plan. I think it's a good kind of reference as we talk through some of this. It'll be helpful too when we get into the street maintenance options here that council asked us to look at.
Thank you very much.
Council, what you have before you is what we continue to call our fiscally constrained capital projects fund for the next 5 years. You've seen an iteration of this prior. We had to make some adjustments just based on needs that have occurred since the presentation about a month or so ago. But the bottom line is at the end of 2016, we had about $15.8 million in the fund. The intention is to maintain at least 1 year's worth of lease payments, so the 1.7. So then the true available balance at the end of 2016 is about 14 million. And then what we've done is we've gone through and we've reviewed our capital needs over the next 5 years, and we've prioritized them within the constraints of our revenues that are coming in and spending down the fund balance that we currently have in the fund. So you can see at the end of 2022, the ending fund balance will be about $797. Again,
Nada.
I'm sorry?
Essentially nada.
Essentially zero, other than the 1.7 that we're maintaining for lease payments. So the list that you have before you up here are a list of what we consider unfunded priorities related to the capital projects fund. You can see over the next 6 years, we're spending about $40 million in total. But on top of that, we have additional unfunded capital needs as well. Some of these are listed here, and the total of that is about $93 million. And those are just things that we have identified currently. The $93 million does include the effort to have $4 million a year in traffic and street maintenance. So that is included in the $93 million. But I do just want to remind you that those are just needs that we've identified currently. Building Service Center 2, or Service Center Building 2, Littleton Center improvements here, police and fire equipment. That includes apparatus, fire trucks, medic units, life-saving equipment. Our city vehicle replacement program, we have drastically reduced that, and Keith is going to continue to talk about the capital projects fund, and he's got a really...
So just one question.
Yes.
The 93 million is over the same 5-year period?
No, I should clarify. The 93 million is through year 2032. That's a good clarification. I apologize, I should have clarified that. If you look on page 34 and 35 of your packet, you can see it broken out between the years 2017 to 2022 and then 2023 and beyond to see that breakout of the 93 million.
I'm sorry, what page again?
34 and 35. So projects that are unfunded through 2022, and these are ones that we've identified, and this is compared to our 2017 budget that was presented last year. The unfunded total is about $15 million. So we already have identified about $15 million of projects through 2022 that we simply cannot fund based on our current revenue trends. Again, included in that is estimating street maintenance at about $4 million. And then beyond 2023 is about $77 million. To kind of just give you an idea of some of the things that we've identified that we currently are not able to fund.
Maybe one of the more notable examples I want to point out to you here is in the 5-year plan, the spreadsheet, at the bottom, funded projects, you'll see building maintenance projects. You see we have about $472,000 that we've talked through with council already here for 2018, but we have nothing after that. So when we look at trying to constrain based on our forecasts for this fund, we really can't afford to add any significant building maintenance beyond that. So if we have some kind of a significant problem, then we're going to have to look elsewhere within the fund here to actually cover that cost. Something will have to move out in order to cover that in some kind of emergency.
It has reglazed the courthouse windows. Are we talking about replacing the windows?
Yes, we talked about that was that yesterday?
I believe so, yes.
Yes, yesterday. So the window replacement had to do with starting to phasing the replacement around here at the Littleton Center. Just based on the age of the building, the windows leak when it rains, and so we're having to come back and.
On the courtyard. That's what we talked about last time, was courtyard windows. But now here it's saying courtyard windows, 80,000 to glaze, or reglaze.
Oh.
What I said last night, sorry, I'll come up to the microphone. Keith Reister, Public Works. To replace all of the windows and basically reglaze or even reseal the windows out there, you're talking a couple of $100,000. So we're just kind of piecemealing the windows out there as best we can.
So the windows that you would install would not be glazed already?
Some of them are glazed now. It's a 40-year-old building. The glaze on and off the ones that we have.
But it says courtyard, and that's the windows you're talking about replacing, right?
Yep. And those windows are long past their lifespan.
Well, I understand. I guess my question is, if we're going to replace the windows, what is the reglazing part all about?
There's some that wouldn't be replaced. I mean, 140 is not doing the whole thing.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so it's not every window's going to be replaced. That's right, you did say.
We would just do that in January, make sure everybody's comfortable in the building.
That's how government does it.
We'd make sure this would be the first work we did. Make sure the meetings were shorter.
I'm okay with that.
I think just a couple of comments in here. At the Littleton Center improvements, I know we've had some discussion about making some significant improvements here at this facility here. And we definitely have some mechanical issues here with this building. But in my opinion, I just don't see us having the resource to probably deal with that as the first priority. And we've had this discussion a couple of years ago. There are other priorities, in my opinion, that probably need to rise to the top here for us to talk about. And quite honestly, the Service Center Building 2 is an issue that we will have to address. And it is $4.5 million. And we cannot wait 10 years for that building. So that is something that, while it's not in the plan, at some point in the near future, I'm not sure exactly when, we will have to come back and talk about that building. It's to the point now where it is just a serious problem.
So we're talking $8 million to really, between the streets and the building too. That something needs to happen.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, there's some things that are just a high priority. Building 2, street maintenance definitely is one of those issues. There's some other things in here, like widening a county line road. That was a high priority for the council a few years ago. It was in a partnership here with Douglas County. Centennial. That's kind of got pushed back. It's still there. It's still discussed, at least at the staff level, but it's unfunded. So at some point in time, I'm sure it will come back. But there are, in my opinion, there's just some real high priorities here we're just going to have to address.
Looking at 2018, on Tabor Capital Projects, am I reading this right? We're showing an expenditure of 1.9, but we're not showing the revenue of 1.9.
The revenue is actually in the year 2017, at the top of the first column.
Okay, so I think the intent of this was just to try to highlight maybe some of the more significant issues here. Maybe council's got some questions about very specific unfunded priorities here, but I think that's trying to help you understand what's not in there when we look at this fiscally constrained plan.
Well, these are all things that we have to take care of.
Yep.
This is $93 million worth of things that have to be dealt with. So why don't we start having that conversation?
So
how do we do it? Not do we do it,
Well,
but how do we make this happen? We can't. This isn't about whether we want to or not. At least 20 million of it is have to, and in less time than we probably all like to think could be actually liability. Building 2, I don't even want to think about that. I mean, how bad that. So I guess.
It's a scary place to be.
Yeah, and we have employees working in there, so how do we do this?
So just to add to that conversation, and it was Councilmember Clark's point last night, is we have a reserve that exists. We see it being spent out in the capital fund. We could spend it faster if it was appropriate to spend it faster. I mean, we can change the tempo. But we do have 17% in our general budget operating funds. That 17%, there might be another figure that's acceptable and appropriate. We could move to that and then free up the money to make the conversation along the lines of what is the minimum acceptable balance and see what we arrive at as a delta, and maybe that could be part of the spending. I mean, I'm not sure.
What about
the existing money, and then we have to look at revenue, and we need to look at...
because that's money that would... I think it's kind of scary to dip into there.
If I may, staff's prepared to kind of talk about some options based on the questions raised by council last night. It was just, what is it we can do? And in that particular question was to accelerate street maintenance. So Tiffany, I might have you and kind of march through some of this alternatives here, but it basically touches on the issue that the mayor just raised about how maybe the general fund might be used for that, at least in the short term.
So last night we recognized that the question is we'd like to increase the street maintenance by $2 million for 2018. So we've listed out some options here for that. The one option is to remain as we are, status quo, keep it as is in our proposed budget with the dollar amounts that are in there. Some pros to this is we are investing in our core projects throughout the next 5 years while remaining fiscally constrained. Some cons are what I just alluded to, is that about $700 is what's going to be left in the capital projects fund at the end of 2022. What that also entails is we've already incorporated decreases over the next 5 years to our building repairs, just like Mark alluded to, and also our fleet maintenance and vehicle replacements, and even IT and the street maintenance. Another option is we could increase the 2018 budget by $2 million by reducing the fund balance. If we do that, a pro is that we are preserving the street maintenance for 1 year. Some cons to that would be it could impact, I believe Debbie mentioned, matching ability out of the capital projects fund for future projects. There's a potential that it could affect the bond rating if the city were to go out for a bond in the next few years or so. One of the items they look at is how much you have in reserve, and it could affect the bond rating for the city. And then additionally, in order to do $2 million, that's going to bring our balance $2 million short a couple of years earlier. So then we would be looking at additional cuts.
We're just going downhill faster.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well,
that's good.
I think we would also be looking at some of these items that are unfunded and whether we want to do them or not. I mean, I can see the Bowles Barn, is that Stan Dodge's property?
No, that's the city's.
It's the city's
city
property,
owns
but
it.
it's-
we own it, yes.
It's at Winnetka, yeah.
That's
That's the area.
Yeah, I don't know why we have the barn. Frankly, I don't know why we have the house.
We wonder as well.
Yeah, so as
Can we sell it?
And I'll mind you, if it's on the unfunded list, it's not included in this 5-year.
okay.
So just for
And it's only $50,000. Go bigger, Doug.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Go
mean,
bigger dollars.
I'm just picking that as an example that I can see off the top of my head. When we go through the capital projects on a year-by-year basis and look at it, we may end up having a different priority than what the staff did in coming up with the 5-year capital projects plan. We may decide to fund some things, we may decide not to fund some things. So I still think that not funding, if we have $12 million of street improvements $10 million, or whatever the figure is that needs to be done, and we have money in the fund balance right now,
34
I think we,
and a half.
34 and a half, well,
If I may, we do have a little more information here to share, which I think might help the conversation. So we got a couple of other options, plus I think some details that Keith may want to share with some of the specifics of the pavement preservation. Is that correct?
That's right. So the other two options are transferring money from the general fund. We talked about the 17% reserve, and if council's decision is to reduce that reserve, then we could simply transfer that money to the capital projects fund. So that's another option. Some of the similar pros and cons is number 2, and then this could potentially impact general fund operations, depending on what council's direction is on the fund balance. And then a fourth option, because we do have a healthy fund balance in the sewer fund, is we could borrow from ourselves and borrow from the sewer fund to help fund capital projects with the note that we would pay interest to ourselves. So that is a fourth option.
Yeah, make sure that's clear. If you borrow from a utility, you have to pay it back with interest.
And we have done that previously. Many years ago, we borrowed from the sewer fund to help no, I'm sorry, it wasn't the sewer fund. We borrowed from the water utility fund for storm drainage.
How much interest do you have to pay?
I would believe it would need to be a market rate.
Okay, I was thinking that.
What is it?
I would guess about 4%.
It's a good time to borrow money.
from ourselves.
From ourselves.
Once again, it
What
doesn't
happens
make...
if we don't pay ourselves back? Who beats each other up?
We might have some rate covenant
Jerry
issues.
knows somebody.
Jerry.
You know, when we're sitting on $20 million of reserve in the general fund and the capital projects fund, it seems premature to be borrowing from the sewer fund. Because once again, we're looking at projects that are 5 or 6 years in the future that we might not be able to fund. I mean, if we get 5 or 6 years in the future and we can't fund them, then that may or may not be an appropriate alternative at that point in time.
But it's an option that we asked for, options, and that's what they're throwing out there. We're not here to shoot them down, are we? I mean, we're here just to pick them. They presented them. We got to pick them tonight.
So I want to throw some rain in the parade too.
That sort of changes everything.
I believe you were the one that said we had to make a decision.
Yeah, to wait, yeah.
We can take a 5-minute break if you do that.
Well, to get back to Jeff's point, I mean, if you're taking down a reserve that's at a level, then you're doing it in other than a situation or a contingency for which that reserve is there. You need to be looking at what's your revenue source to repay that. And I don't see any revenue up there that's going to repay anything that talks about spending something down sooner.
Not out of the capital projects fund.
Right.
So one other piece of this too, when you're talking about borrowing from ourselves at a reasonable interest rate, I would anticipate the cost of concrete, for instance, is going to go up dramatically over the next several years because the state of Texas and the state of Florida are rebuilding up with all the concrete that's available and all the people to do it. So that may be a good thing to borrow at 4% to avoid a 20%.
But China's getting less.
And we also have China shipping concrete to the U.S. Exactly. So 4% for a potential 15 or 20% cost increase. Somewhere those need to be part of the considerations. You're saving money for something that's you're not saving at a rate of what it's going to cost you.
And I would also add that the $93 million is in today's dollars. That's not even adjusted for inflation. So.
Oh, well, thanks, Tiff. That's
So we've looked at some projects to do to this building that potentially would save us money because we are leaking heat big time out these very inefficient courtyard windows. So since we're saying, hey, we want to, I think we said, we want to deal with those windows. If we then are saving money, that is helping us. It's not going to pay for this, but if we think of some other kinds of ways to be more efficient, and I think if we and staff put our minds to it, we might see more ways to be more efficient so that we don't have so much expenditure in the next, let's say 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Yes, point taken. I think this building is a good example. I'm not a mechanical engineer, but we have a very unique heating and cooling system. It's this constant pressure that blows through the building. And so it's been designed with vents that constantly exhaust. And they leak at times, and we've physically had to remove those vents. So it's a very odd building, and so it's not efficient. What it requires is a significant investment to replace that, and for which we don't have the funds, at least identified here in the constrained plan, to actually make that improvement. So, point taken, that level of investment, that resource, to a large extent, is really not there for us to take advantage of, just because of our long-range fiscal challenge here.
So what we're hearing is that if we borrow from our reserves, we don't have a way to pay it back, which means that we don't have a way to replace deteriorating assets in the future, because you've got a schedule of when things are going to wear out. So then the question becomes, what services do you want to cut if we get into that situation?
We need a revenue source to pay for this.
Maybe
that's my opinion. We need a revenue source to pay for this. And that probably looks to me like a sales tax increase. Nobody likes tax increases, but nobody likes $93, don't we wish? $93 million worth of unfunded projects, of which at least 25% of that needs to be dealt with, I would say, within the next 3 years minimum.
Let's get through the rest of the presentation, because I think in the end, staff has a recommendation.
Keep going, because we're jumping ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to finish the rest of this.
Let's go.
Okay.
So the next couple of slides, and Keith can come up and describe these. We just kind of want to give you a visual of what we're looking at, specifically in the fleet fund. We keep talking about 1.2 million, 1.3, 1.4 in needs, and over the next 5 years, we've drastically reduced that to about 600,000. So I'll let Keith.
So I was trying to, this slide and the next one, I tried to put together some graphic visual images to help you understand where we're at and where we're going, specifically related to fleet, facilities, and pavement maintenance. In this particular graphic at the top, we have, if you look at our replacement schedule for fleet over the next 5 years, the annual average in there is about $1.4 million. Now I'm going to tell you that if a fleet consultant came in and looked at the existing fleet here, that number would be a lot higher. Most of the vehicles in Public Works are in the 15-year range already. So we have to do the analysis on, we are at a point where we're spending more to keep some of these vehicles alive than it is to replace. Currently in this year, we have 600,000 budgeted, or excuse me, 1.2 budgeted for the fleet replacement. The next 3 years, that number is 600,000 of the 1.4 need. And you can see how those needs break out. I put the color stacks in there. A vast majority of that, as you can see, Public Works are big because we have big equipment. On an average, in every one of those years, you have almost an average of 10 police cruisers or other police vehicles along the way. That's rolling stock, much like we just talked about this building, not related to office space. A police vehicle is an office. An average police cruiser is $48,500 in today's dollars. And those guys and women spend the vast majority of their time in that office every day. So we have to remember that as we go through that. So that's a comparison of where we are and where we're going and what our need gap is today. If you take our current I took the current book value of our assets in the facility side. I took out all the fire facilities because I put them in a separate category. The acquisition value of those assets was $32 million. Scaled out, that's at least $60 million today in replacement value. So if you were sitting in Hurricane Irma today, you'd be talking about maybe $60 million in replacement value. That's just buildings, not FF&E inside them. And the average, the industry standard for spending, even at the low level, is 1.5% of your maintenance and grounds of your asset value is an industry standard. We're at about, even this year, we're at about 50% of that. To give you a standard. You can go to the next slide. This is a slide to answer the question about pavement maintenance and what it would take to make the needle move. All right? This is a graph that was developed based on the 2014 Pavement Management Index that was done. So this goes back to 2014. In 2014, your pavement index was 64. Today, that index has probably deteriorated to 61 based on the average that we're at and where you are in the rate of deterioration based on industry assessments. So what this graph shows is 5 different scenarios. The first scenario in 2014 was, what if you went out there and fixed it all in 1 year? You used the Sheridan model. You fix it all in 2 or 3 years and then you maintain it from there. That's the black line at the top. The blue line at the top is the concept that was discussed at the time with council, or theoretically was discussed, where you took 64 up to an industry rating of 71 for your pavement condition index. That's your blue line. The green line shows just staying where you were at 64, and then you can see the declining ones right there. Those down in the left-hand corner in 2014 dollars, that's what you would need to spend to stay at each of those lines, each of those projected lines. We have 161 centerline miles, 325 lane miles. You pretty much figure $1 million per mile in asset value for roadway infrastructure. That's our spend in the right-hand corner over the last 4 years. The average spend, including the uptick of the last 4 years, is $1.4 million. If you wanted to keep it the 64 rating that existed in 2014, the average spend would have to been $2.3 million over that time span. So what I put in was that little purple spot is, even though we've spent an average of $1.4 to $1.5 million over the last 4 years, you're still spending at a deficit. So if you think of your roadway asset value at $161 million, you take it down to today's value because of deterioration to the 64 level, it's $98 million at your asset value. So you have to spend a certain amount to keep that value in there. You're investing in the asset that you have. And at a certain point, you're investing less and you're basically taking cash out of the bank. And that's what historically we've done here. And this is a graphic to show where we've been. So if you drop $4 million in there, let's say for next year, and the year after, you're going to get an uptick, but the problem is you're still going to have an ongoing gap if that number falls back below, let's call it $2 million or $2.5 million. And that's just the pavement maintenance. So this graphic is designed based off the data that was collected on every street in this city in 2014 to show you what that gap analysis is.
Appreciate all of that. I could turn to Kelly right now and say, how would you explain that to citizens?
I understand that. We had a long discussion about that in my office today, actually, with this graphic by itself.
So, but there are also a number of possibilities that happen going forward that aren't necessarily just for the city that might be in a position to help the city. One that I'll categorize as incredible at the moment was the president's presentation on putting capital into local jurisdictions, essentially doubling the highway user tax fund allocation that would go to local jurisdictions. Second is, which didn't make it through the legislature this last time, was House Bill 1242, which would have provided direct items to municipalities to help with infrastructure costs. third that the mayor has talked about is absent a statewide solution to get money to local jurisdictions is the possibility of an RTA, whether that's the metro level or at the county level or whatever, that would possibly be providing a revenue source that's there. But that trigger point is relatively, that's within this next year. As much as it would be nice to be in control of our own piece on this, there may be some other items. And I appreciate the discussion that ends up being on the sales tax, because that was precisely what the Commerce City did in theirs. That's why they're going to be less interested in any RTA that might be even Adams County based. And I've seen a number of presentations around RTAs.
Sheridan might be the same example.
Yeah, Sheridan's another example that's there, although not as populous as Commerce City. So I'm wondering whether it might be a prudent thing to be in this, to be aware, figure out how do we share with folks whether we're dealing with an RTA vote or support for a 1242 legislative solution that might be closer to a statewide solution. It sounds, at least from some of the wins, that 6 or 7 months from now, we may be in a position where there's a larger scope solution that might be in a position to help us.
There's certainly lots of alternatives out there. In the list of potential revenue sources, there's one specifically related to street maintenance that I've done in other communities. You know, as a side note, part of the RTA discussion and such at the state level, having been highly involved in that, here's just your transportation trivia question for the night. When was the last time the gas tax was raised in Colorado? You were correct. What about the federal one?
89.
That's correct. The last president to sign that was Ronald Reagan, to put that in perspective. So, you know, at the same time, we've eroded our buying power. So the question is we're not, you know, we don't have this pot at the end of the rainbow, and we have a deteriorating infrastructure amongst a host of other needs. And balancing all of those is the challenge. So how do we make those parts and pieces fit together and tell that story? So we put this particular slide together to show you, you know, what the options are, because the question last night was, you know, what can we put in there to make a difference? And so this is the data that we have available from our pavement condition index in 14, and that's what it looks like.
So it's the $3 million that's going to make a difference.
You know, that basically, if you want to raise that up, $3 million a year is what you need, and that, you know, that's going to, you have to have, you know, there's going to be an escalation factor in there too.
$2 million keeps us where we are, and $3 is really to make a difference.
Yeah, one of the challenges we really have here too is there's a backlog. So your deterioration cliff is a lot nearer than, say, a community that has a lot of newer infrastructure in it, say like a Centennial. You know, where they have a lot of new roads, their bubble's a little further out. We have a pretty strong backlog just because of the history of spending. So, you know, that ramp up's going to be a challenge too.
So Keith, does that mean that if that green line is the stability line, where everything stays the same, that we have to invest a significant amount up front in order to maintain that?
Yes. Yeah. Mark can jump in there.
Yeah, because I think the 2014 report was suggesting that an investment of $4 million over 10 years to kind of deal with the backlog.
Right.
And then drop that down to the $3 million in order to maintain that, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're going to print.
I took that slide out.
Okay.
That was actually in here, and we took it out right before we went to print. So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the reality is the backlog is an issue here because of historical spending. So that is a challenge that goes with it.
I'd ask that we keep moving here because I think there's a recommendation, isn't there, somewhere?
Right. So what you have here is the staff's recommendation. We would like to take a cautious approach, kind of like we've been doing.
Yeah, it's working.
However, there's some changes coming.
Sorry.
Will that work? You see that? We've been directed and we want to continue to maintain a 5-year fiscally constrained plan. In April of 2018, we'd like to provide an update on where the fund balances are to council after 2017. We'll have a better idea of where we are. And then at that time, we would suggest that council revisit what the fund balances are, and then at that time, you could appropriate for specific projects that you see deemed necessary. This is a staff recommendation. We understand that council, whatever direction you give us, we will march forward with, but that is a staff recommendation.
So when we had the audit and they did beyond the numbers, and they had the section where they talked about peers, which those cities may or may not have been peers, but they did have a slide on
Fund
reserves.
balance. They did.
Reserves, or fund balances and reserves, however
Right.
they were talking about it.
Right.
And we were somewhere on that slide, which I'm going to ask you, where were we? And would it be prudent to be on another place on that slide and pump some money back out today and still be at a comfortable place?
I'm sorry, I had actually intended on bringing that, because I do know they had that graph. I don't remember exactly where we are on that slide. I feel that we were below the average of our peers. But I don't remember that
So based on
number.
that slide, we would not want to go lower in our cash percentage, or our fund balance reserves.
If you want to compare to your peers, no.
Can, at least within the staff recommendation, put a little addition to it, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, is in the April 2018 also be taking a look at where our revenue is trending.
Yeah.
To include that as not just a year-end fund balance, but we'll have some idea of how 2018 has started.
Can you put the slide back on with all the fancy colored lines on it?
Doug likes the colored ones.
Next time we'll print your presentation in color, sorry.
And it has the purple wedgie.
Okay, so, to me, we're making two statements here. One is, if we're not spending $2.3 million on the roads, and we think that that's important to be spending $2.3 million on the roads to just keep it the way it is, with our 5-year capital forecast, and what that means is we've decided at this point in time that there's other stuff that's more important than the roads. That technology, just to pick one, whatever that is more important than the roads. Say in 2020 when we have $1.3 million of technology expenditure, and we're still at the HUTF amount, which is $1 million less than what we're doing. So what we're making the statement is that there's other things that are more important that we think the citizens value more than maintaining the roads. The second issue is we have a Tabor election this November. And part of what I'm hearing is a lack of trust that we're just going to take the Tabor excess money and basically spend on other stuff, because we're not spending what we would normally do on the roads. So we're taking the Tabor money and spending it on the roads, and then taking the money that we would be spending on the roads and spending it on other stuff. So, what's being presented is a valid argument. So I think one of the things that we need to decide is what our priorities are on capital projects, and specifically what our priorities are to the citizens. And then I think we need to figure out what kind of statement we want to make to the citizens on what we're actually going to be doing with the Tabor money and what it means if they give us the $2 million and if they reset the base. And frankly, at this 5-year capital forecast, I don't think we're making a very good statement on either one of those. Now, I have no idea what the $1.3 million of technology is on 2020. But I know that the roads are at 1.4, and I've got a slide in front of me telling me that we need to be spending 2.3 just to stay at that level. So I don't know what the technology is, but I do know that we're underspending other roads. So we can make fun of the Bulls Barn because it's only $50,000, but until we go through and look at what those capital projects are for the next 5 years, when we're using that 5-year forecast to determine what we're going to spend in 2018, then we really haven't associated the value that we think the citizens will put on those various projects.
And we do have a list, so of the 1.3 million, 700,000 of that is related to the police department, what is it exactly?
For the 5-year?
Yes.
Records management
The
system.
records management system for the police department.
Okay?
So that's part of the 1.3, just.
So I don't know at this point what that means. Is the record management system breaking? Do we need to add more records? And I got to tell you, not looking at fleet vehicles bothers me because there was a period of time when we were replacing police cars, and I don't mean to pick on police, but I just happen to remember this figure. We were replacing the police cars at 34,000 miles. And we had some vehicles that we'd had for decades that had 15,000 miles on them. So, you know, when I'm looking at industry standards on how we replace vehicles, that's not very meaningful unless we can translate that down to exactly which vehicles that we're talking about and what our replacement schedule is. Okay.
You know, and I want to tag on with a little bit more absolute terrible rating. But I was here, you know, as an employee, and I worked on the budget during the 3 recession periods we talked about, 90, 2000, 2007 roughly. And each time I was tasked with reducing the overall budget of the police department by 5 to 10%. And so, I mean, I was personally involved in that, and every time it came back to people. You know, that was where the budget savings were. You know, you could choose not to buy a car for a year or two. You could choose not to buy a computer. But really, if you're talking about ongoing, continuous eating up new expenses, they were personnel. And I would say that unless we begin to find some solutions on this capital side, we're going to have to go to the operational side. And I did it 3 times over 30 years, and it was people where it was cutting back services. And I remember one time we were talking in the police department, cutting back 13 to 14 positions out of about 60 positions, and we were deciding what functions we no longer do. And so this is a discussion that we need to begin to resolve now, so we have a plan to keep from getting to there. And those were unanticipated. You know, maybe the economists would say they were anticipated, but they were unanticipated. But this is anticipated. We could see this coming, and we're either going to have to solve it in some way, or we're going to have to change the level of service that we provide as a government here. And that's going to involve people and cutting service.
And if I may, Mayor, right to the point of why, in my estimation, why we need to be looking at a priority-based budgeting system so that the council can establish what are your priorities and make sure that we have the resource in the appropriate spot. So if the council decides that they do not want to fund certain kinds of services anymore, then we put the resource in a different location. I think it's that system, and I appreciate the fact that you really haven't been exposed to what that concept's really all about, but it's my experience with that is that it gives the council another piece of information so you get to see what the total cost is for a particular service and the level of service. My hope was that we would start that process internally, or at least discuss it with council, you know, right after the first of the year, so the council would understand what that means. But in the end, to me, it's about positioning ourselves so we understand our expenditures. It's hard to have a discussion about some of these issues when you're looking at line items, and so I'm looking for another tool to help the council understand and manage really the expenditure side here.
Well, that goes back to my comment I made earlier about inspecting for a carbon, detector. When it was all about solar panels. I mean, that's where we have to look at. That's how we can start making reductions right there. Is, you know, the car trip just to get out to my house to go look at it, put miles on the vehicle, somebody time away from the office on doing something else. It's going to be a overall review of everything. It's not just revenue, it's also expenses.
Agreed. I think that's why I'm highly recommending, obviously, priority-based budgeting.
And that's what that's
That
about.
issue.
Exactly.
Yes.
So did you buy a carbon monoxide detector?
I already had one. That was the whole point. But we had to find time to be home, so it was inconvenient for everybody. But the dollar value, which is what priority, budgeting is all about, what do we get out of it? Is it really worth it?
So, I think we did have some other slides, I think, about the revenue piece here, but I think, my thought was that after the election, we know really the outcome of the Tabor election, and resetting the base is going to have a significant impact on us as we look to the future here. But my thought was that after the election would be the opportune time here for us to kind of, again, through the first quarter, second quarter perhaps of next year, evaluate where we're at financially, much like we've been talking about here, looking at the capital. This is a model. We did our best to try to predict that, but, it's not going to play out exactly this way. We know that, but in the spring, we're going to have a better idea of where we stand financially. We can update this. Maybe there's some additional revenue that the council would like to dedicate for other purposes. I think it's an opportunity to kind of talk more about priority-based budgeting, because I do agree we're going to have to look both at the expenditure side, but also we have to look at the revenue. And then I think it's in that first half of next year where we're going to have to make some decisions about where to go in the future, because the staff starts the preparation of the 2019 budget in July. And so there will have to be a pretty robust discussion here over the first 6 months of next year. That's my recommendation.
But I'm not sure our position is strong enough to go to a Tabor election with the budget decision that we have tonight. If we move it 6 months.
I don't know how you argue this with the complaint is.
And
And what we're basically having is the staff making decisions 2 or 3 years in the future on what the relative value of comparative capital expenditures are.
And I understand that point taken. I think it's, we had to make some assumptions about what we thought might be a priority. And again, through a different system, you'd have more opportunity to really truly set and understand the priority. It's just...
I think we have two situations. I think that the Tabor is one thing. The Tabor is we have the excess money. We have a history of asking the citizens to let us keep that, to continue to support their services for the citizens. We detail that out. We keep a presence on the website about how we're spending it, what we're doing. And so I think that and I hope the citizens continue to trust that that we have shown a vigilance in protecting that and doing exactly as we said. And it's money that is needed. It's not money for buying new, pots for the plants. So I think that we have a good track record of being very respectful of that Tabor, and I hope the citizens continue to trust that. The 5-year fiscally constrained and the other stuff we're talking, that is, to me, that's different. I'm not crossing it over with the Tabor thing. And part of what's happened is that the community doesn't know about this unless they watch this. And with 47,000 citizens, they're not all watching this. This is, well, I know you think they are, Gary. But this is what's important for us to get get through the analysis of this so that we can start making the difficult decisions. We are elected representatives of this community. This is not easy. This is not the fun part. This isn't going in the parade. This is the tough stuff, and this is where we have to pull up our bootstraps and really work and make some difficult decisions. And that is also, it's incumbent upon all of us also to project, to message what we're doing so that the community understands what the situation is. Yeah, for us to just say, we're going to raise taxes, or we're going to do this, or you're going to pay more for that. That's, yeah, nobody would. But here's why. So I don't think that, I have a lot of confidence that this community will understand and will support what we need to do. And we just need to really get our hands around this thing and get it going. Because it isn't something that, nobody wants to have this dropped on them as a surprise. We've been hearing this. I've been hearing this for 4 or 5 years when we started doing those 5-year plans. So, I don't expect that the citizens are tracking that. They elected us to do that and take care of it, and we have a responsibility to that. So it is a big egg to crack. It is not going to be easy, but we have to get it done.
We've talked about both sides of this a little bit. I think it does become priority setting, and priority-based budgeting may be the way to get there. I'm not familiar with how that mechanism works when you sit down at the table to do it. But I put a lot of faith in this fact that we have a very professional staff, and a lot of them go to professional associations. They know what they're doing. They are up on the trends. These are their professions. So when they look at a line item, they know what trends are coming in their own profession. They know what it's going to cost. They're going to know what technology changes are necessary to do their jobs properly. How many miles you get out of a fire truck, how many, all the technical pieces of their jobs. It's up to us to figure out if we want those jobs to continue. So that's one side of it, is do we want to cut services at some point? There are some parts of this community that it's easy to cut the service in. The other side of it is if the citizens say, no, we want that service, how do we get the money to pay for it? So it's one side of the ledger or the other. This is not rocket science to try to figure it out. It's either if you want that service, here's what it'll cost to deliver it. And the accumulation of that is your financial statement. You reduce expenses or increase revenues or a combination of the two. And it's always easy to go in there and try to cut expenses. Those are relatively easy. It's hard to increase revenues because there's a lot of resistance to it. But that's a citizen decision. That's a citizen decision if they want to have these types of services over the long run. They need to make that decision. If not, we cut them out. And that's a presentation issue. It's a trust issue. And I think on the Tabor deal, we have spelled out very clearly with the 1.9 million what would be done with that money. We've been very loyal to that in the past. I think the citizens' trust is to do what we said with it. And if we raise the base, I think it may be a good idea down the line we could dedicate. We can do a lot of things in order to keep that trust in place, but we have to do what we say we do. But those are our two options. We can either cut services or we can raise revenues.
What I'm looking at least doing simple back of the envelope math, is what's in the first item, second bullet point that's up there, as far as maintaining, leaves us with a gap of what is an unsatisfactory status of our streets. But it says we're going to maintain and not at least get to the point where that's worse, but we have a gap of 1.3 to 1.4 million. I'd like to hear more is, Mark, you've talked about a process that gets us to the point of supporting making those decisions that says, here's how we close that gap. And I'm interested in hearing more about that, anxious to hear more about that, so that we can at least get to the point where we're looking at maintaining what many folks consider to be an unacceptable level right now. And doing more than that is probably following the same process, just tightening the screws. And I would like not to wait too long to hear at least what that process might be, so that we can have some confidence that if we go through whatever exercises are there, however that discussion is going to be with engaging citizens and each of us rolling up our sleeves and donating blood, whatever it may be, we have some confidence it's going to get us to the right place.
I appreciate that, and I do have some very specific ideas about how we might approach that, and we'll be more than happy to share that in a study session. I do think that I want to make sure that the council has confidence in the 5-year. So, and I appreciate what we've done here. This is a new planning tool. Staff had to make some assumptions about what we thought was a high priority, and you really did not have the opportunity to kind of hear that discussion or see that. So I would like to be, as part of that discussion about how we move forward, is to walk through the detail of this to make sure the council is comfortable, has, again, confidence in it. I would add that to the agenda.
Sure. And just as we want to have some confidence that the trends in retail model aren't going to somehow drop the floor from us, and we're going to be scrambling even more.
Mark, I just want to ask, is this Keith, is this the chart that you came up with?
That was done by our consulting group that did the payment.
Yeah, so that's an excellent chart. That's exactly what I was hoping to find when I asked that question last night. Thanks.
You did a good job with that.
Well, I'm just trying to find a reason to sleep tonight.
Yes. Okay, I'll be a lot of time.
So, I'm not leaving comfortable with where we're at, but I don't think we can resolve it tonight, so something to think about a little further.
Bruce, it should be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw that out there. I think it's a really tough situation. We're all gonna be diligent about it. I have faith in all of us to try to find a good workable solution, to come to a meeting ground, to engage citizens, staff. It's gonna work hard at this too. We'll find a way to make this work. Littleton's not going away.
Where were you going with that?
Well, but we do have to move on. We have one more topic.
One more topic, at least for tonight.
At least for tonight. It is somewhat of a smaller number of zeros in the revenue area than perhaps we were hoping to talk about. But we as a policy group do have to give guidance on fees, and ask for appropriate ordinances and whatever. Or however, we're doing it one time, one fee ordinance was the way we were trying to do it each year, and it's included in the budget.
Great.
Is in the past, we've done it bit by bit, piece by piece, and it was
Skip some, because we're doing it bit by bit.
Yeah, so this is the system that we've gotten to. That's why we're doing it tonight. And I want you to know that it was brought up by at least a couple council members that we're obligated to do it legally, the fees based on the cost of the city. And just to comp it back again at a rate that's appropriate to what the expense is. And so I asked Mark to give a little clarity on that as they're talking about what the staff proposes as the fees.
Yes, we did kind of skip over this. I think this is part of the discussion we had intended. When we talk about revenue options, there's a list of issues we've talked about in the past. I think we're going to add this to the conversation that, I think Councilmember Cernanda kind of captured here is when we kind of present a, kind of methodology of how to approach this here to address the issue. So this will be rolled into that. My thought was that if there are some other issues, revenue options you want us to consider as staff, great. You certainly let us know. Otherwise, we're just going to carry this into the conversation here into the future. So with that, we do have a discussion here about proposed fee increases from the development review side. And I'm going to ask Keith and Jocelyn here to kind of help us with that conversation here.
So, I guess while Jocelyn's getting up there, basically, as we've talked about this as a staff, development review in this community, we don't really charge hardly any fees for the development review services in this community is a simple way to put it. Jocelyn can go through what we charge for development review services and community development. And I'll just state straight away that there have never been any fees charged for development review services out of engineering in this community ever.
How does that compare to other communities then?
I know of no other communities that do it that way. The common phrase that you certainly hear in this business in communities throughout the Front Range, especially high-growth communities, is development pays its own way. And so depending on the community, we may, I mean, if you look, Arapahoe County, Douglas County, Jefferson County, every community that joins us charges development review fees, without exception. And we, even the fee proposal that you see here behind us is, on one and two slides you have, doesn't even come close to, even if we ramped them up to the 3-year recommendation on the engineering side, that's still at 40% of what any of the peers around us charge today, just to give you a comparison. So the basic number that we came up with today, because it's all personnel and consultants in engineering, percentage of time and workload for individuals, our cost to do development review services in engineering is just over $600,000 a year. Our rate of return on revenue for that is 0. So we're proposing some fees. The fees that you see up there are very, very basic. Basically cover 7% in year 1 and work their way up to basically 20% over 3 years. We had a lot of discussion about how, the question for you is at what rate and how quickly do you want to put fees in if you do. You can share the development review side or the CD side.
Well, similarly, I guess, except for the fact that there are some planning fees existing, and what we wanted to do was to bring the discussion forward to you and provide you with some data and some background. So a couple of those tools were, in the packet that was handed out to you on Monday was an assessment, because we have 0 engineering fees, right? We know that. Just to give us some comparables, what were Littleton's planning fees relative to our immediate jurisdictions, just so that we could get an understanding of where we were. So from that review, it turned out that we're generally at the lower end right now. And in that attachment that was for you for some reference, it was with 9 communities, including Littleton, and we took the highest and lowest fees out of that. So it really was Littleton out of 7, whatever. So that just gave you some data. So it came out that just for the understanding of where we are compared to others on the planning side, we're fairly low. And then then if we were to move to like middle of that range, what would that look like for the fee numbers? And then as Keith said, then the thing that we provided for you up here is, this slide particularly talks about the engineering one that you just went through, and then on the top is planning. Currently, our revenues are approximately, we estimate for this year, because they've generally been about that number for the last 3 years, $59,000. The second line is our costs, salary-wise, of FTE that are involved in current planning review, and then the revenues and how much those revenues are offsetting our costs. So that's what's structured here for planning and then engineering, to just also give you that context all around.
fascinating how much the county charges.
Yes.
Arapahoe does really, they generally manage their fees to recover the majority of their price.
So I'm going to ask for maybe perspectives from a different side. So recognizing that we're doing planning and engineering on a new build and a rehab. And I'm going to ask for what it might be on a new residential home, on a rehab in a residential home, on a new commercial, and a rehab on a commercial. What does this add to the cost of a project? And you can say, dealing with some of this, this is what the cost is now, and this is what it would be.
I'll take, go ahead.
And because I'm trying to say, if I'm looking at a building or a project,
We wouldn't, engineering generally wouldn't touch a rehabilitation. You're talking about site plans, transportation, water, and sewer. Unless, and you basically utilities, and some of those are referred out. If it's a rehabilitation project, it would come through community development and building, so we wouldn't be touching those generally.
okay, so there's nothing on rehab, but then what might it be on a new residential or a new commercial?
So generally, fee-wise, if we're just asking.
Yeah, I'm talking about the
so-
fee. If I'm building a new building, then how much does this currently cost, and how much does it increase the cost from a construction perspective, recognizing they're going to cover their costs?
They're going to pass it on. If you
Right.
assume in most communities, what you see is a developer or builder will pass those fees on directly into the price, which is built in. Right now, the number is zero for engineering, and this number would probably maybe add $150 to a single-family home.
So, I'm going to suggest that rather than us trying to evaluate the fee recommendations that you have, because we're kind of, you were more informed than we are about it, I was thinking, can you give us the recommendation that you would like to have us approve, and and get with the city attorney prior to it coming to us, so that he can look at the procedure and the laws and the issues, and be able to represent council's need to make sure that the fees represent a reasonable recovery of existing costs.
One of the questions I would ask is a philosophical question, and for guidance to staff.
Absolutely.
There is a philosophical question about what level of recovery you want to attain. That is an important question, because if you want to only attain 25% recovery, that drives the fees. We do the work analysis, we do the process analysis, and that comes to your number. If you want to recover 100%, like perhaps we were just talking about with Arapahoe County, that drives where you go. So from a philosophical standpoint, from a staff perspective, we need guidance on what level of recovery you would seek.
Well, council always has the ability to waive fees as an incentive. Is that correct?
So let's just start with what we had in front of you tonight, and then that is one of the questions, and I think the other part to that is, we also have to think about what I think you guys were talking about earlier, level of service. I mean, this is a pretty complicated question that we're asking you, that we need some policy direction to decide where you want to go. What we had started with to start the conversation was, hey, these are where the fees are today. There's zero in engineering. Some of them are zero in community development. We want to add some fees to the zero number for community development. And then what we proposed for you was in 3 years, we would be getting to generally the mid-range within looking at our immediate jurisdiction. So that's how we had proposed it, but that is the philosophical question. When you want to know how much recovering in cost, how you want us
So
to do that.
let's discuss and make a decision on council.
We do a lot of citizen services. We really do. This is not a citizen service that should be distributed over the entire city. If Keith builds a new garage, I don't feel like I should pay for his review. And I'm doing that. I think it ought to be a recovery 100% recovery.
Whatever Arapahoe County's doing works for me.
If somebody wants to build a building or do whatever it is, that's part of the cost of it.
We're not disagreeing with you.
No, I'm just stating my point, because what it does, I mean, plan review is so important because you're getting a second opinion to make sure your builder is doing the job right. And all of the services you provide are really life safety issues for everybody involved. And it ought to be, I think it ought to be 100% recovery.
So if I'm
Deb, Deb had a hand. Deb.
I agree, and in part because we have always made it a practice with fees, and even some of them are small, $5, $10 court fees, stuff like that. Our response is, what does it cost? We're not going to try to make money off of fees, but we need to be able to pay for those services through that, because it isn't fair that the entire community pays that difference. So I agree. I think definitely we need to do full recovery on this, and maybe we have to do a baby step in terms of shocking. I don't know what the temperature, what the model out there is, but maybe do a 50% and then go to 100, because once again, when you look at, when I was just flipping through trying to find the page where it showed the shortages that you have in your department for staffing. We're charging the correct amount of fees. We may have the money in the general fund to staff this department correctly so that things didn't take 4 months and burn people out and all of those things. And it's just all begetting the place that we are now. And if we couldn't fix that, and I agree, development should pay for development.
I was just going to say, I'm doing back of the envelope math, okay? So from an engineering perspective at full recovery, given what you gave me for a residential single-family home, it might be $750 for a new build residential. Does that sound like it's in the right range?
That seems a little high to me, but we can come up with those numbers for you by class. We can certainly do that.
And
We would have to do that.
What's that?
We would have to do that because
Well,
to your
I
point,
know,
the
but
level of.
for the purposes of tonight, I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to a rough pace, okay? 600?
Yeah, sure, we'll call it that.
Okay, say it's 600. I'm just trying to get to some point.
Yep.
And if
You're on TV.
Nod your head,
I have my
yes.
envelope here, so I can't do the same math.
I know, okay, and if I kind of split planning between rehabs and new builds and deal with that, might be 200 to 250 per unit. So we're talking about something like $800 or $850 for a new build. And so, because the question comes up, what are we doing to attainable housing for, say, a new build? And for rehab, it would be the 200 or 250 from community development. And so that's what we're talking about. Just to put it in range, I'm trying to get it on a per unit basis to get to a rough idea. So,
Well, and the percentage of the cost of that project, $800 or the percentage of the cost of what a
Right,
new build is.
that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to say if we went to full recovery and
What's that?
So
Let's just make a decision.
So let's go around at this point, because it is past our 9 o'clock and our brains begin to slow down.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, could I just make a suggestion? I think this is a pretty complicated issue here, how the amount of money we charge, not only does it how it translates into all the different permits and the fee structure, but I also think it's complicated as it relates to kind of the development community itself and the message it sends.
right.
So I think there's a series of relationships here that I think we just need to be aware of, depending on how we want to promote ourselves here, really in the development community. I do agree we need to be charging more to recoup some of this cost. I think one of the questions as a policy issue is just maybe in the first year, how far do you want to take this level of recovery? Because I think I would suggest we may want to get more formal in how we study some of this. I got to be honest, some of our accounting systems that we have in place really are not easy for us to navigate through to tell us the true cost. So there are some things I'd like to put in place for the long run to help us understand that, have a better idea. Then in maybe the second year, we actually do more of a real rate study. It's my utility hat coming on, sorry, but how we kind of evaluate some of this. But I think the policy question is, how far do you want to take it the first year?
50% then, for me.
I like the recommendation that they're making, and then we continue to justify it as we move along. But we have to get started on that. We're nice for another year.
It seems to me if we're going to do it, we ought to do it. And the way to do it is to look at what other communities are doing. If we don't charge any more than they do, then we're just staying even, which seems to me an intelligent thing to do. If we charge more than they do, we discourage people from wanting to build here. So it seems to me we look at what other folks are doing and we match that.
And on the other side too, is that if we're not charging the right amount, all because we can be nice to developers and things, then we're not being honest with all of our citizens, including the people buying it. Because if they're buying that property, that asset, hey, by the way, we're not going to be taking care of your streets, but you got a heck of a deal on your property. If it's 100%, I say we get there ASAP.
Well, and to Patty's point, it said right here in the thing they had on one, I just pulled it up, City of Centennial, $10,300. City of Littleton, $2,900.
We got to make a change now, like it or not.
Got to make a change. I'm in, Jer. Let's do it.
And I don't need to give a big old speech on pumping everybody up. Let's just do it.
I was a country club manager in a prior life, and we looked at menu rate increases all the time. We found that every time you raised them, everybody screamed and yelled. So you might as well hit them once and get it done, instead of just getting them to scream and yell at you every year. So let's just do it.
So they're looking for the policy philosophy, and it was proposed to go baby steps to full blown. I'm hearing a couple of people say just move it up. I know the city manager said he'd like to do.
There's one piece that we put in the process, which was.
Wait, are we going around the table first?
Yeah, we're going around the table. I just want to add this. That was in the process was a review of the methodology by the attorney to say, hey, this will stand up because.
I would expect that anytime.
We still have the philosophy that we're not looking for this to be beyond actual costs.
What the rule of law here is that you can't charge fees that exceed your cost of service. In essence, these fees can't.
Right, we never have.
We don't want to.
And you wouldn't want to. Now, one of the things that normally is done in a lot of jurisdictions, and I think the city manager was trying to allude to this, was you would normally, if you were going to move towards 100% cost recovery, you would actually have a cost of service study done where you'd look at all your methodologies, you'd make sure your methodologies are valid, how you calculated the numbers, make sure all of those things all were valid. One of the things I think the city manager was saying was, we do have some concerns as we get close to 100% of recovery about our cost of service methodology and making sure that that's valid. So you might want to look at, okay, as part of what the city manager had suggested, maybe a cost of service study to do that, you move towards that 100%, but you don't do it all at once, so you build that into it.
So we have Fundware, right? Pardon me? Are we still using Fundware?
Yes.
Yeah, Fundware can do that.
Financial Edge, yes.
How difficult is that to do?
Okay, so we're still looking for, we don't have the exact policy in front of us. We have what they have on the board there. They're asking for, and the letter that they're giving to us. Are we comfortable with that kind of incremental approach? Come back to us with an incremental approach. And I'm hearing that we want to recover the full cost. We just want to do it incrementally.
I don't want to do it incrementally.
I don't want to do it incremental.
I heard the manager say he wants to do the study.
Another study.
So,
I mean, here we sit, we're not even charging an engineering fee. What's wrong with, I don't know, this is why we're in this mess.
This is why we're in a mess, and we're gonna continue in this mess until
Exactly,
we
because
do
we're
it.
just going right back into
I
it.
thought Peggy said she wanted to go all the way, and we've got 3 over here.
So,
So
yeah.
you're 100%, 100%, 100%.
100%.
100%, got it. Move to 100%.
Have fun with that one.
You guys figure it out.
We'll get the vote on it, we'll get the vote on it when it comes forward.
We'll make it work, and we'll make it legally
Vote on
defensible.
it twice.
We'll have it legally defensible.
We're done.